Kami decides they will make the post 3 days before the deadline of the challenge, and Aiko is concerned, but trusts him. Kami also tells Kabi to finally go through with his rap battle against Sekitoba so he can focus on helping Aiko afterwards. Kami wants to use Aiko's new song to gather the 100,000 likes they need. Before Aiko went to his studio to record her song professionally, Kami gave her multicolored bags and told her to open them if she gets anxious. She is curious and decides to open them immediately. Inside, she finds a note saying she needs to buy 2 jumbo-sized puddings, a public road usage permit, and a ticket to the observation deck of Shibuya Sky Square. She doesn't understand what it all means, but she buys the pudding. Meanwhile, Kabi contacts Sekitoba and arranges everything for their rap battle. Entering the recording studio, Aiko meets an easygoing DJ called Kid. Kami made a bet with Kid that if Aiko can make a song Kid is satisfied with, he won't have to pay for recording it. If she can impress Kid, Kami will become Kid's tactician. At first, Kid isn't motivated, but after Aiko gives him the pudding she bought, he agrees to begin the recording session. Singing her favorite singer's song, Aiko impresses Kid, but he tells her she doesn't have her own voice. He sends her away until she finds a unique voice that is her own. Meanwhile, Kabi is writing new rhymes for his rap battle, but can't come up with anything. Walking through town, Aiko remembers the public road usage permit Kami gave her and decides to perform on the street. She notices a black-haired girl singing on the street and is impressed by her voice. Suddenly, the police stops the girl because she doesn't have a permit to sing on the street, and Aiko hurries towards her. She gives the girl the permit, wanting to hear her sing more. After the police are satisfied, the 2 girls get to know each other. The black-haired girl, who is called Nanami, invites Aiko to play the guitar and sing with her. Hearing the 2 of them perform together, people on the street stop to listen. Afterwards, Aiko and Nanami decide to sing together the next day too. The following day, Aiko meets up with Nanami again, who brings a bass guitar with her. Nanami turns out to be skilled at playing the bass, and the 2 of them perform together again. Aiko notices Nanami can sing a cover song, but make it sound like it's her own song, so she tries doing the same. The next day, Aiko and Kabi both don't know how to get better. While Aiko is singing, Kabi joins her, rapping along with her. The 2 of them turn out to be an amazing combination. However, they still feel like there's something missing. Aiko feels like Nanami has something she doesn't, and Kabi feels Sekitoba has something he doesn't. In order to return to his roots, Kabi visits his old high school. On the street, Aiko performs with Nanami again. Afterwards, Nanami invites Aiko to a public bath and dinner. Meanwhile, Kabi meets his old friend who introduced him to rap in the first place. They rap together for a while and have fun. Kabi thinks he can beat Sekitoba, but his friend makes him realize that winning isn't what's most important. The most important thing is to have fun. He tells him that he's proud of Kabi, no matter if he wins or loses. Seeing she is troubled, Nanami decides to help Aiko get more singing experience and teach her how to sing better. The days go by, and Aiko performs on the street with Nanami every day, getting better and better, until she finally feels she's ready to sing for Kid. While Nanami is waiting for Aiko to come back to Kid's studio, she gets a call. A man tells her she should stop singing on the street. At Kid's studio, Aiko sings for him. Kid admits she's gotten better, but thinks she won't be good enough until she figures out what her real goal is. Afterwards, remembering she got a ticket from Kami, Aiko takes Nanami to the observation deck of Shibuya Sky Square. Nanami admits she's actually Azalea's masked bassist and vocalist. In high school, Nanami formed a band called Azalea with 3 other girls. When they graduated, the 3 of them moved to Tokyo, but their band wasn't very successful. One day, a producer called Kurosawa found them, promising they will get extremely popular in 2 years if they listen to everything he tells them to do. At first, they declined, but shortly they realized they can't make it on their own. When they agreed to listen to Kurosawa, he started controlling everything about Azalea, their outfits, songs, and choreography. As soon as Azalea changed their image, their fan base started growing. With time, Azalea became extremely successful and profitable, but the girls had to give up on their own music. That is why Nanami started singing in the streets so she could capture her love of music. She wants to join Azalea, but she doesn't want to betray her staff and fans. Aiko confesses to Nanami that she's aiming to participate in the Summer Sonia Festival, just like Azalea. Aiko suddenly gets up and starts singing, wanting to support Nanami and all the people who have their own troubles. With the intention to reach Nanami's heart, she sings better than ever, making Nanami cry. Kurosawa calls Nanami and she leaves, telling Aiko they will probably be rivals the next time they meet. Before she disappears, Aiko tells her she wants to sing with her again one day. A week before the deadline for the Summer Sonia qualification, Kabi is ready to confront Sekitoba, and Aiko is ready to present her singing to Kid. At Kid's studio, Aiko manages to convince Kid to produce her song. At Kurosawa's studio, he tells the Azalea girls that they will hold a surprise concert in 5 days where they will hold a 1 million yen giveaway, with which you will ensure to get 100,000 likes. Meanwhile, Kabi's rap battle is beginning soon. He is nervous and gets his determination back, thinking about representing everyone who has as little self-confidence as he does. He climbs on the stage and faces Sekitoba. Kabi raps confidently about finding his own way of life and representing all the people who are like him, impressing Sekitoba. After the battle, before the winner can be announced, Sekitoba decides that Kabi has won. Inspired by Kabi's victory, Aiko, together with Kaming and Kobayashi, go to Kid's studio where they finally record her song. Aiko is impressed by Kid's arrangement for her song and starts singing. Hearing her sing, Kaming feels like he has returned to his own time. He remembers meeting with his lord, who tells him he wants to achieve peace so his people can be happy. Asking Kaming to assist him, Kaming agrees. Until the deadline for the Summer Sonia Festival qualifications, Aiko keeps practicing and polishing a new song, while Nanami also does her best. On the day before the deadline, Aiko and her friends meet up at the BB Lounge for a strategy meeting. Meanwhile, in Shibuya, Azalea prepares to hold their surprise concert, but the girls aren't enthusiastic because they're relying on the power of money. They board a truck with a mobile stage and head out to the place where they will be performing. However, knowing everything about their plans, Kaming prepared a truck of his own. Stopping the truck in the middle of Shibuya, Kaming confuses the people outside. When Aiko starts performing one of Azalea's songs, the crowd starts thinking Azalea started performing not being able to see well because of the thick fog. People start gathering around the truck, searching for the QR code for Azalea's 1 million yen giveaway. Meanwhile, Karasawa finds out someone else is singing to Azalea's music, while they haven't even arrived at their concert's location yet. Suddenly, Kaming's truck displays a QR code and the people start scanning it and liking Aiko's post. However, the counter stops at 70,000 likes when the people realize Aiko is not actually Azalea. Azalea's truck finally arrives at the same location where Aiko and the others are and start their own concert, attracting everyone towards them. Nanami feels like there is no other choice for her but to perform even if she doesn't enjoy it. Suddenly, she sees Aiko and is ashamed of herself. She doesn't want Aiko to see her wearing the clothes she doesn't like in the song, which isn't hers. Azalea finally reveals the QR code for their giveaway and their post starts getting liked rapidly. However, Kaming still has one more trick up his sleeve. He tells his plan to Kabi and he starts rapping. He raps about Azalea being imposters who lip syncs and are controlled by their manager. Azalea's fans start getting angry, but start getting suspicious. A confusion starts spreading and people start thinking Azalea are fakes and the QR code leads to a scam website. Even though Azalea only needs 2,000 more likes, they're like counter stops. However, it turns out Kabi overdid it because the audience starts chanting to Aiko and the others to go away. Nanami asks the audience to quiet down and Aiko starts singing. She attracts the audience back to her with her beautiful and polished voice. Karasawa thinks quick, wanting to premiere Azalea's new song, but Nanami doesn't listen to him. Hearing the song, Nanami and her bandmates realize they need to stop working with Karasawa. While she is singing, Aiko's post rapidly gets likes until it finally gets 100,000 of them as soon as she finishes her song. The audience cheers loudly and Kaming tells Aiko she is in control. Suddenly, Nanami and her friends unmask themselves and start playing one of their own songs from their past. For the first time in a long while, they enjoy performing and the audience loves them too. When they finish, Karasawa tells them there is no way they can succeed by themselves. Nanami and the others say they will keep making their own music even if they continue failing. Suddenly, Kaming appears, showing that he has recorded Azalea's performance and immediately uploaded it to the internet and getting an overwhelmingly positive response. A large number of people gather around Azalea and cheer him on. That night, everyone parties at the B Lounge. Even Karasawa is there and Kaming talks to him. Kaming figured out Karasawa wanted to succeed as a musician in the past, but he couldn't make it. That is why he wanted Azalea to succeed at any cost. It turns out Karasawa truly believed in Azalea, but his methods were wrong. Suddenly, Nanami and her friends appear and thank Karasawa for everything, asking him to produce them once again, this time with their own songs. On the roof, Iko finds Kaming and thanks him for all his help. Kaming says his strategies in the past resulted in the loss of many lives, but is thankful to now be able to use them for peace and the people's happiness. He promises to continue supporting Aiko in the future. Suddenly, Kabi appears, telling Aiko to come down and perform her new song for the audience once again. Heading down with her to see her perform, Kaming sees his former lord in Aiko. Hey, thank you for staying all the way till the end. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like. It takes only a second, but it means everything to us. Have a great day. In the year 234, during the three ordinary modern Previously, all the way till the end. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like. It takes only a second, but it means everything to us. Have a great day and see you in the next video.
Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. My friends, your time is precious. I'm not going to waste it. Guys, for the last 8 months, I've been cautioning you, and other people have as well, about the potential for this war to escalate to the nuclear level. And it appears as though it is all but imminent at this point, especially if we take the hardliners who are party to this conflict on their word, be they Zelensky, Putin, Biden, or any NATO leader, who all have their preconditions that preclude any sort of diplomatic, peaceful solution to this problem. This brinkmanship has reached a fever pitch. It is to the point where we very well could see, almost to the point where it's very probable that we will see a nuclear incident within the next week. Now, I'm not saying that it is going to happen, but I'm saying that if the Russians get chased out of Kherson, then the likelihood of that happening escalates significantly. It may not be a nuclear weapon that is detonated in Ukraine. It may be some low-yield nuclear test somewhere in the far nether regions of Siberia. It may be in the Black Sea. It may be a low-yield tactical nuke that emits an EMP over a city and kills nobody but takes out the power grid. It could be something like that. But mark my words, if and when that nuclear incident happens, that's going to have a ripple effect throughout the global economy, the likes of which we probably haven't seen for many, many generations. You are going to see panic, the likes of which you've never seen. This is why I'm encouraging people, get ahead of the curve, do whatever you have to do to get your affairs in order right now. Do not rely on the same people who lie about everything else to tell you when the shit's going to hit the fan. Okay, the window to prepare is getting shorter and shorter. Now, when this incident happens, if this incident happens, like I said, we're moving from possibility to probability now. We're at a point where, based on what the commander of the Russian military has said today, I'm getting very concerned that something is about to happen. To the point where my heart is beating making this video, okay? Because I have so much information that I want to share in such a short period of time. Guys, we're talking about the government evoking War Powers Acts, Emergency Powers Acts. We're talking about some kind of lockdown situation that will likely be put into play. We're talking about the regulation of media. We're talking about the regulation of internet. We're talking about rationing. We're talking about possible conscription. We're talking about whether or not you're an essential worker means you can or can't leave a certain country, especially if you're in Europe. Everything I'm saying right now is going to be doubly and triply so. Okay, we're talking about potentially if it escalates, because you need to understand it's not about the nuclear incident itself. It's about the fear that it's going to escalate to the mutually assured destruction level, to the World War III level. And as soon as nuclear graces the headlines of mainstream news around the world, the panic ensues and the government has to come in and do what the government does, and that is overreact. Now, remember that with these emergency powers and these War Powers Acts, the government has the ability to commandeer your stuff. They have the ability to take your land or reallocate your land. If you're a farmer, this is something to keep in mind, that there's a footnote in the War Emergency Powers Act for you and your family. You need to be prepared to relinquish certain things, and possibly even yourself, because if you work in an essential service position, you will be conscripted. A big part of the war effort is not just the people who are on the front lines. For every guy in the front lines, it takes dozens of people behind the scenes. It takes doctors, nurses. Especially right now, I have no idea how the Ukrainian military is still functioning. If we take the Russians at their figures that indicate that for the last month at least, the Ukrainians have been losing 600 to 1,000 guys a day, casualties that is. I don't know how they have a functional medical system in Ukraine right now, or even in Russia for that matter, because we're talking about numbers that would make COVID look like a picnic. So now is the time to prepare. Okay, there is no more excuses. You have all of the evidence, most of it's circumstantial, but a lot of it is right in your face. It's public knowledge. It's there for you to see. Now, to add to this madness, okay, and to add to the body of evidence that indicates that this very well could spiral out of control, that it's no longer theoretical and it's actually probable, this is just one survey, one of thousands of surveys done by hardliners on either side every day. This is from a Ukrainian side. Okay, this guy has a popular YouTube channel. You probably know who he is. Do you consider peaceful measures like sanctions an appropriate response to the terrorist acts committed by Russia involving kamikaze drones and missiles used to strike Ukrainian cities, tortures, can't use that word because YouTube, and genocide? Most people said, no, we don't support that. The implication is that they want NATO to be directly involved and party to this conflict more explicitly. They want NATO to intervene. They want a no-fly zone. Just like Biden said, that would lead to World War III. They want some sort of security guarantees for Ukraine. They want troops sent to the front line, which of course means World War III. So 76% of people, these hysterical, sanctimonious nitwits, think that nuclear war is a joke. In fact, he even leaves an option here. Oh my God, negotiate because they have nukes, because it's a joke to them. Now, I have great sympathy for Ukrainian people who are suffering and who have suffered in this conflict, but that doesn't mean that you get to take the whole world down with you. It just doesn't. There are plenty of wars that are fought all the time that are happening right now where the option to drag the entire world into a nuclear abyss isn't there. This is not a joke. This is absolutely not a joke. If you think it's a joke, then explain to me why governments around the world spend billions and billions, probably literally in the trillions of dollars, on their strategic nuclear deterrence. Because this is not a joke, but a lot of people think it is. And these same people who think that it's funny are going to be sitting there in their irradiated, burned out city. Their hair is going to be falling out, and they're going to be surfing for a cell signal so that they can post some more dumb shit. Guys, I'm not saying that we need to bend to what Russia is doing entirely. I think if anything, okay, use some sanctions, use some sort of diplomacy. I don't think that Russia gets to act with impunity with respect to what they're doing, but understand there's a reason why we have NATO. The reason why we have NATO is to extend the US and France and the UK's nuclear umbrella to these other countries, so if Russia messes with them, then they get nuked or they start World War III. That is our deterrent. Ukraine, unfortunately, is not in NATO, so they don't get to suck all of NATO in. They don't have that Article 5 privilege. It's just a fact of life. And we cannot continue to get sucked in this. When you have the richest man in the world, who's arguably maybe not the smartest from an IQ perspective, but has a respectable amount of intelligence, warning people that we are on the brink of nuclear war, and everybody pokes fun and everybody tries to politicize the issue, we got big problems. The window to prepare is closing, and my friends, you need to take this shit very, very seriously. Zelensky has warned Ukrainians that there are tough times ahead. 1/3 of the power grid has been blown out, is out of commission in Ukraine due to the airstrikes, more recently, more so drone strikes, that the Russians have been doing on Ukraine. And they persist with this completely unwavering mentality towards diplomacy and negotiations. That means that they're willing to take this right to the end. Now, winter hasn't set in yet, and they're still doing this Kherson offensive. I think maybe the goal is for Ukraine to try to take Kherson, and then that's likely where their offensive is going to stall. Because they just don't have the manpower to continue at this rate of attrition. There are just too many casualties. Even if we take, 1/10 of what the Russians are saying the casualties are, they still cannot continue with that level of loss. You have 1,200 towns and villages that are currently without power. Now, this Sorovkin guy is saying, and this is if we take him on his word, he's saying that the reason why they're considering evacuating Kherson is because of this situation right here. This is a dam called the Kakhovska hydroelectric plant, okay? Kakhovska. I'm not sure if I'm saying that properly. Probably butchered it. But this is the dam right here. And this dam, this one dam, holds back all of this water, okay? So if that dam gets blown by the Ukrainians, right now they don't actually occupy that region. Right now, so they would have to do it with missiles of some sort. Short-range missiles would suffice for this kind of job. But if they were to blow that dam, then that could potentially flood out this entire region. And because that means that all of this water that you see backed up the Dnipro River here, that means all of that water gets sent downrange, and that could potentially flood all this out. That is the excuse that they're making. Now, you need to understand that if the Russians get chased from this side of the river, there's only a limited amount of time for them to get all of their stuff back to this side of the river, because there's limited amounts of bridges in order for them to cross, especially if the Ukrainians cut them off. The Ukrainians probably will want to give them that opportunity to retreat. This is all if this is actually happening. There is a information blackout here right now. We don't really know what's going on because both sides are at it. But this general, the look of concern in his eye is pretty serious. And I'm very concerned that this has the potential, sorry, I got so many tabs open here, that this has the potential to escalate quickly. Now, some people are saying that when he says that we have difficult decisions to make, that he's referring to the fact that they may actually use a nuclear weapon in some sort of deterrent fashion. For example, the wonderful tabloid, The Sun news agency, more of a tabloid, is saying that a nuclear option fears Mad Vlad on the brink of detonating nuke over the Black Sea in a show of force as Defense Sec scrambles to Washington. So they're saying that maybe in order to stop this Kherson offensive, if it's even happening, if it's even viable right now, that they may well detonate a nuke. We really don't know what this guy is thinking. We know that in the few days that he's been in this position of commanding the Russian military, they've went from almost no attacks on Ukraine critical infrastructure to knocking out 1/3 of their power grid. We're talking about 1/3 of Ukraine who doesn't have water, doesn't have heat, and doesn't have power. And even Zelensky is admitting that a lot of those things aren't coming back for a long time. And that's just after a few days. Okay, so imagine where we're going to be at the end of the week. So right now we don't know, but we're in a situation in which if the Russians get pushed back beyond the river, then what are they going to do? Because that's going to be a major humiliation for their military. Their people, especially the hardline warhawks, are going to be saying, push the button, push the button. So that's when we get really, really close. Now, right now, the government is saying, oh, there's no signs of nuclear escalation. Like, look at this. So this is the Alaskan NORAD region press release. Now, there was 2 bombers that were spotted, Tu-95 Bear H bombers, Russian bombers, nuclear-capable bombers. That's the only reason why they have these things, at least right now. And that's the only reason why they're flying in this region. Intercepted Russian aircraft which remained in international airspace. Fine, they're allowed to do that. But they say here that it's not seen as a threat, nor is the activity seen as provocative. Now understand, this is coming at the same time that NATO is doing a major nuclear exercise simulating a nuclear war with Russia. It's also known, a senior military official has claimed that Russia has not yet notified NATO or Washington about some potential nuclear exercises it is planning on doing. Now, is this just mirroring, or does Washington actually have intelligence that the Russians are going to be doing their own nuclear exercise in response to the NATO or whatever the case, and they're just not telling them? If there's a breakdown of communication on that level, then we're in big, big trouble. Today, Sergei Lavrov has said that we are pulling out our diplomats from many Western countries. You have, is it Latvia, I think? And who are the 2 countries? Estonia and Latvia, who have now declared Russia a state sponsor of terrorism. Understand, when you make that designation on a country, it's virtually the same thing as declaring war on that country. Now you know they are in it to win it. Okay, there's no turning back now, because they are a part of NATO, which now means, in some sort of de facto way, that NATO views Russia as a sponsor of state terrorism, even though Biden himself, his administration, has admitted that if we say that, then the Russians, that essentially puts us at war with Russians, which is why the United States have not deemed Russia a sponsor of state terrorism, even though you're starting to see that a lot more, the word terrorism, to describe a lot of these attacks on critical infrastructure within Ukraine. So Russia has reiterated today that the 4 annexed regions do come under the protection of Russia's nuclear umbrella. If Russia deems any part of the Russian Federation is at risk of existential annihilation, they will play the nuclear card. And quite frankly, losing Kherson is that very thing. This is a major city, the biggest city that Russia has been able to conquer in Ukraine, annex, whatever you want to call it. If they lose that city, then in my mind, that is grounds, or if they feel they're going to lose that city, then there is grounds maybe to not have a direct nuclear strike, but some show of force. We've seen the posturing ratchet up. We've seen the Belgorod go out to sea, okay, which is the one that has all the Poseidon missiles on it, the city killers as they're called. I mean, all megatonnage and up, not even megaton, you're talking like 100 kilotons. 15 kilotons was Hiroshima, okay? That could kill a lot of people. They're city killers, and the Russians have been doing this posturing, and so has NATO. I mean, NATO has went ahead with this nuclear exercise. Some people say that NATO shouldn't back down. We should not let Russia act with impunity, and I agree. But, you know, there are certain countries that are in NATO, and there are certain countries that aren't. Ukraine, at the end of the day, isn't in NATO. And as much as you might feel compelled to support them with all you got, you know, if you're putting everything into that basket, then we risk annihilation. We certainly do risk annihilation. So I just hope that cooler heads prevail. Now, right now, Belarus is preparing 5,000 bunkers for their population in preparation for war. I mean, that's what it is at this point. You have countless amounts of troops filing into Belarus. They're saying that they're going to need about 200,000 in order to take Kiev. Okay, and they're preparing. So Russia is desperately scrambling to try to hold this region until the winter time.
Okay. I'll just throw these in the back.
Might as well.
You ain't gotta tell me which way.
I mean, it really don't matter.
You taking everything off,
Boy,
though.
I'm trying to put them in the bag.
What you taking?
Your little freaky tail self.
Bro,
Bestie, oh. Man, stop saying that. Stop saying that.
If you
if I want to drive comfortable, I'm going to drive comfortable.
No, I understand that. You can drive how comfortable you want. I mean, like, but if you acting like this, I'm acting right.
Okay.
I fuck with the vibes for sure. Two for that.
But since you wanted these off so bad.
How you say it so poppin' shit? You would think I went to school for chiropractic. Looking good as hell today, just sit my.
Hey YouTube, it's your girl Mardear, and I'm here with my first video. And y'all know I had to come with a banger. As y'all can see by the title, I'm gonna be stripping for the bestie.
Let's go.
And y'all know.
In the middle of a battlefield after an intense battle, a red-haired boy called Tiger is left all alone. Looking at a white-haired girl who is his enemy's leader called Eleonora, he decides to try killing her with his bow and arrow. He shoots 2 arrows at Eleonora, but she cuts them both in half with ease. Since he is out of arrows, she advances towards him confidently and captures him. Tiger is a poor noble and a soldier from the kingdom of Brune, and Eleonora is the leader of the kingdom of Jechted's army. Brune had an overwhelmingly powerful army and was sure they would win the battle, but their forces were defeated by a sneak attack from Jechted. Tiger wakes up in a palace in the Jechted kingdom where he is taken to Eleonora. Eleonora makes Tiger prove his archery skills, but he can't shoot his target with the first 2 arrows. Suddenly, an assassin appears on the roof and shoots at Eleonora, but she destroys his arrow with a spell. As he runs away, Tiger shoots him through the foot from an incredible distance, proving to be a skilled archer once he gets used to a bow. The next day, Eleonora explains to Tiger that she took him as a prisoner because she found his archery skill impressive and found him entertaining. In the battle where Eleonora took Tiger as her prisoner, as soon as her army killed Regnes, the prince of Brune, the rest of the army started fleeing. However, when Tiger tried killing her all by himself, she was impressed and thought it would be a shame to kill him. While Eleonora likes him, Lim, her right-hand woman, is angry at Tiger because he shot her horse in their battle. Eleonora asks Tiger if he wants to serve her, but Tiger refuses because he needs to protect Alsace, the territory he inherited from his father. Staying Eleonora's prisoner, Tiger gets used to life there and fit in with the other people. He even started getting along with Eleonora and she let him call her Ellen. That night, Tiger is told a man from Brune has been captured. It turns out the captured man is Bertrand, a loyal attendant of Tiger. He tells Tiger that Duke Thenardier's army is marching towards Alsace. Hearing this, Tiger instantly confronts Ellen, telling her he needs to leave, but she doesn't let him pass. When she angrily tells him he is foolish for wanting to defend Alsace all by himself, Tiger realizes Ellen is actually giving him a chance. He bows to her and asks her to lend him her troops. Ellen laughs at him, refreshed by his honesty. She tells him she will help him if he gives her Alsace in return. He agrees and they ride to battle together with Ellen's army. Duke Thenardier sent his son Zion to attack because after Jechted's army killed the prince of Brune called Regnes, the only people fit to rule the kingdom are either him or a noble called Ganelon. He wants to take Alsace before Ganelon can conquer it. Meanwhile in Alsace, a maid close to Tiger called Tita is evacuating Alsace's residents together with the territory's knights. She doesn't evacuate since she cares a lot about Tiger and wants to be there when he comes back. At that moment, Zion's army invades Alsace, rampaging and pillaging everything they see, but Zion is disappointed when he finds out the residents all evacuated already. Seeing Tiger's house, he decides to break into it. Hearing him enter, Tita confronts Zion, bent on protecting her and Tiger's home. Zion pulls out his sword, threatening her and having fun. Suddenly, an arrow shoots through the sky, piercing Zion's arm and making him scream in pain. Tiger rides into town together with Ellen and saves Tita. Realizing she has been protecting his home, Tiger thanks her. Ellen sends some knights to apprehend Zion and leads the others towards Zion's army. Before Tiger leaves, Tita gives him his father's black bow. Ellen and her knights manage to defeat 300 of Zion's soldiers, but the rest regrouped with Zion's army. Zion himself also managed to get away. Knowing the land well, Tiger concludes Zion's army regrouped in the Molesheim Plains. While Lim stays in Alsace and gathers rope from the citizens for her plan, Tiger and Eleonora go attack Zion's main force. Reaching Zion's overwhelming army, Tiger, Ellen, and their army start fighting them. Ellen fights with her sword that can control wind, while Tiger uses his bowmanship and they overwhelm their enemies. Zion brings one of his 2 dragons into the battle, and it starts killing Jected's soldiers. Lim and her troops appear, fighting Zion's army and giving Ellen the chance to face the dragon. Ellen takes out her sword and gathers wind around its tip, chanting a spell and shooting the mass of wind at the dragon. She cuts it in half instantly. When a part of Zion's army advances, Lim's unit retreats, revealing a long rope and tripping the enemy's horses, making them fall. Tiger and Ellen combine their units with Lim's and ambush the rest of Zion's army at their headquarters. Hearing that 2,000 soldiers are coming, Zion starts panicking and orders his troops to retreat, showing how pathetic he is. However, it turns out Tiger's army actually has less than 100 soldiers, but has taken with him 2,000 spare horses to make it seem bigger. When Tiger reaches Zion, Zion gets angry at him for betraying the kingdom by working together with the kingdom of Jected. He proposes a duel and Tiger agrees. Zion fights on horseback using a lance, while Tiger chooses to fight only with his bow. While Zion mocks him, Tiger fires arrow after arrow at the same spot on Zion's shield. When Zion charges at him, Tiger shoots a single arrow at the same spot on his shield, piercing Zion's arm and making him panic. The 2 armies keep fighting, but Zion starts escaping on his dragon. Determined not to let Zion get away after everything is done, Tiger hears a female voice coming from the bow and telling him to shoot the dragon. Tiger charges up a powerful magical arrow, while Ellen notices it's her sword that's giving him power. Tiger's arrow flies an incredible distance, killing both Zion and his dragon. As Zion's forces retreat, demoralized by their leader's death, Tiger, Ellen, and their army celebrates. The next day, everything is peaceful in Alsace once again. Ellen departs to Jected's capital Silesia to explain her recent actions to the king. Meanwhile, Duke Thénardier plans to send a group of assassins called the Suresh together with another war maiden to attack Tiger and Ellen. In Silesia, Ellen talks to King Victor, a long-haired old man. She tells him she helped Tiger in order to protect the peace in Brune, but the king doesn't accept that explanation. A blonde girl called Sophia steps out, standing up for Ellen and convincing the king she is not a traitor. Later, Ellen meets a blue-haired girl called Ludmila, who confronts her about siding with Tiger. They start arguing, but Sophia appears and stops them. When Ludmila leaves, Sophia tells Ellen that Ludmila has been in contact with Duke Thénardier recently, making her Ellen and Tiger's potential enemy. The next day, Tiger finds that Masha's, one of his loyal attendants, has returned to Alsace. When Tiger tells him he wants to attack Duke Thénardier in order to defend Alsace, Masha supports him. Sometime later, Tiger meets up with Ellen, who tells him that if the territory of Alsace becomes hers, she will have to hand it over to the king of Jected. Since Ellen and the other 7 war maidens have a great deal of influence over the king of Jected, Tiger and Ellen will have to win them over in order for Ellen to be permitted to side with Tiger. Just when she says their only potential enemy is the war maiden Ludmila, Ludmila herself barges into the room. She has come to talk to Tiger. While they're on their way to a town called Rodnik, Tiger and Ludmila talk while Ellen and Lim ride behind them. Ludmila admits she is Duke Thénardier's ally and tells Tiger he doesn't stand a chance against him. Suddenly, they notice there is a wire trap in front of them and are forced to stop. Assassins start coming out of the forest and start attacking Tiger with blowdarts, but Ellen and Lim protect him. One of them throws a poisonous snake and Lim gets bitten by it, but Tiger reacts quickly, sucking out the poison. Ludmila summons her magical spear and joins them in fighting the assassins, killing all of them. She goes looking for Doctor for Lim, while Ellen and Tiger, carrying the unconscious Lim, ride on to Rodnik. The next day, Lim recovers thanks to the doctor Ludmila found. When Ludmila leaves them, Ellen predicts Ludmila will attack her territory Leitmeritz, so she orders Lim to strengthen their border patrols. Ellen's prediction comes true and Ludmila soon organizes an attack on Leitmeritz, while Duke Thénardier is threatening to attack Alsace again. Ellen gives Tiger the decision to either fight Ludmila right now or focus on defending Alsace. Tiger decides to protect Alsace and sends a messenger to Ludmila, but she ignores him, so his army is forced to engage her. After the first day of war, both sides suffered heavy casualties but remained in a draw. The next day, Lim reports that Ludmila's army retreated to a fortress in the Taxer Mountains, where it's hard to approach them. However, Ellen is determined to win, so she deploys her soldiers, but isn't successful. After that, the war comes to a complete standstill, but Tiger gets an idea. During the next 3 days, he scouts for the best way to the peak of the Tatra Mountains wearing bear skin as a disguise. He comes across Ludmila, but she doesn't recognize him, and they end up spending the night together talking around the fire. She tells Tiger her life story. When she was chosen to be a war maiden, she was ready for the responsibility but was forced to work with people she hated. In order to uphold her family's honor, she had to hide her feelings. The next morning, after Ludmila leaves, Tiger waits for a while and follows her footsteps, discovering a path to her fortress. Having returned to Ellen and his army, he leads them to the fortress. Ellen runs in and tries destroying the fortress gate with her wind magic but fails. Getting an idea, Tiger uses Ellen's sword to give him strength once again. The sword agrees and gives him magic power, strengthening his arrow and enabling him to destroy the fortress gate with it. With the gate open, Tiger's army storms inside. Coming out, Ludmila faces Ellen personally, and they clash. Ellen uses wind magic while Ludmila uses ice magic, and they fight fiercely, but are evenly matched. Suddenly, one of the Serash assassins runs towards them, but Tiger kills him. This incident stops the girls' battle. When Ludmila sees Tiger's archery skills, she realizes Tiger was the man in the bear skin. He asks her to stay neutral and stop fighting against him. Realizing Tiger is a humble man who only wants to protect his country, Ludmila announces she will no longer interfere in the war between Tiger and Thenardier. Meanwhile, Thenardier manages to convince Brun's king to send Roland, Brun's most powerful knight, to fight Tiger, since Tiger is now seen as a rebel against the kingdom of Brun. Hey, thank you for staying all the way till the end. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like. It takes only a second, but it means. Previously, a noble named Tiger is kidnapped on a battlefield by an enemy general called Eleonora. He is spared and joins forces with his enemy. Together, they fight many battles against another enemy called Lord Thenardier. One day, Thenardier has had enough of those two, so he sends his most dangerous knight to hunt them down. Meeting Roland, Tiger and his army starts fighting against him, but Roland turns out to be incredibly powerful and plows through Tiger's forces. Ellen engages him directly, but barely manages to hold her ground against him. Roland is impressed by her, but she ends up falling off her horse. Tiger rides and picks her up on his horse while firing an arrow into the sky. While Roland rides after them, the arrow falls, killing his horse. Sophia appears, creating an impenetrable shield of light and driving Roland's soldiers back. However, Roland remains standing and destroys the shield with his powerful sword. Being no match for him, Sophia teleports away, having bought enough time for Tiger and Ellen to get away. Leaving the soldiers, Mashes arrives at Tiger's camp, finding Tiger in bed seriously injured and with a fever. Having visited the royal palace, Mashes found out that Thenardier and Ganelon have all but taken over while the king is sick. He found out the king has lost his mind grieving over the death of his son, and Thenardier and Ganelon were the ones who actually ordered Roland to attack Tiger. Later, visiting the sleeping Tiger, Ellen grasps his hand and promises to protect Alsace in his place. The next day, Tiger wakes up not knowing what to do about Roland. His weapon leads him outside where he finds a temple and enters it together with Titta. Meanwhile, Ellen and her army face Roland once again. At the mysterious temple, Tiger finds a statue of the goddess of darkness and death. The goddess speaks through Titta and offers him power if he shows her his resolve by shooting Titta. Tiger takes an arrow and charges up his power to shoot. He gathers so much power that the arrow disintegrates before it hits Titta, and the goddess acknowledges his cleverness. On the battlefield, Ellen pulls Roland away from his main force to fight him alone. Sophia joins her, and they perform a combined attack using wind and light magic, but Roland manages to cut through it. Suddenly, Tiger appears and Roland stops him. Roland asks Tiger if he really brought Jekta's army just to protect Alsace, and Tiger confirms it. Roland falters for a moment, but he gets his resolve back and charges at Tiger. Tiger's wound reopens from the strain, but he still shoots an incredibly powerful arrow at Roland. Roland struggles but cuts through it, leaving a crater in the ground. However, he admits his defeat and surrenders, being unable to lift his arms from the strain of blocking Tiger's arrow. Sometime later, Roland tells Tiger he will arrange a meeting with the king for him, having recognized Tiger isn't a threat to the kingdom. Hearing Sasha is under attack by another war maiden, Ellen decides to go help her. In the capital of Brun, Roland tries to reach the king but gets locked in a room in the palace. Ganelon won't let him talk to the king and releases thousands of venomous bees into the room, killing Roland. Hearing this, the Thenardier is outraged because it was Roland who used to protect the western border of Brun. Ganelon doesn't worry about the western border, but tells Thenardier the southern border is about to be attacked by the kingdom of Muozinal. The kingdom of Muozinal's army of 20,000 men starts slaughtering the people of Brun and enslaving them. Hearing all this, Tiger decides to take 1,700 men to fight Muazinal's overwhelmingly huge army. Using sneak attacks and similar tactics, Tiger manages to decrease the enemy's numbers little by little. Sick of Tiger's schemes, Qasim, the Muazinalan commander, orders his soldiers to start executing their prisoners, forcing Tiger's army to react. Tiger provokes the enemy army, while another squad of his soldiers arrives at the enemy's flank. Underestimating Tiger's marksmanship, Qasim gets shot in the head by an arrow and dies. Seeing their leader is dead, the Muazinalan army gets disorganized and starts running away. That night, having taken in the prisoners, Tiger is surprised to find out that the main force from Muazinal is going to arrive soon. Since his soldiers are worn out, Tiger starts retreating with them, until they get ambushed by the Muazinalan army. Suddenly, Ludmila and her army appear and rescue Tiger and the others. After their battle, Ludmila and Tiger talk. Ludmila offers to join him together with her 4,000 soldiers if he shows her he is a capable warrior. Examining his weapon, she tells Tiger it's on par with some of the War Maiden's weapons. However, Tiger is afraid to use its full power since he doesn't understand it yet. In the end, Ludmila agrees to lend Tiger her strength so she can observe his growth. The next morning, Ellen and Lim head out to Leitmeritz to help Tiger. Meanwhile, Ludmila tells Tiger she wants him to use his archery skills to take out the leader of the enemy army. The Muazinalan army's commander is a formidable man called Curies. Later, Curies divides his army into 7 units and takes it into Tiger's territory. However, even after some time passes, Tiger's army still doesn't react. They send a message to Curies to fall back if he doesn't want to get hurt, but Curies dismisses it, prepared for a challenge. Curies' army continues advancing and reaches a mountain that Tiger and Ludmila fortified. Leaving a portion of his forces there, he lays a siege to the mountain. When his main army notices a group of refugees that were enslaved when Muazinal previously attacked, he decides to pursue and capture them again. However, while they're chasing after them, Tiger and Ludmila launch a surprise attack from a hill they thought was empty. At that moment, it turns out the refugees they were chasing were actually disguised soldiers, and they also attack Curies' army. Tiger, Ludmila, and their army advance, defeating division after division, but Curies calls for reinforcements. While Tiger and the others are advancing towards Curies' headquarters, another Muazinalian division starts chasing after them. After a while, Tiger and Ludmila start having trouble fighting, getting surrounded by the enemy. Suddenly, 5,000 knights sent by different nobles who decided to support Tiger arrive. It turns out both Mashes and Rullan contacted powerful nobles around the land and helped Tiger get their support. Curies wisely decides it is time to withdraw completely. That night, an envoy sent by Curies ends the war and Tiger and Ludmila finally win. The next day, Ellen returns and immediately starts fighting with Ludmila over Tiger, getting jealous of how well they're getting along now. Drinking with Ellen under the moonlight, Tiger apologizes to Ellen for getting so many of her soldiers killed, but Ellen tells him he fought courageously and did his best. 4 days later, Tiger and his army hide in a fort of one of the nobles he has recently joined forces with. Ludmila stays with them because the king ordered her to keep an eye on Ellen. Talking to Lim and Mashes, Tiger finds out someone who looks exactly like the murdered prince of Brunn was seen. At that moment, Regin enters the room, telling Tiger she's actually Brunn's prince, Regnus. Instead of being killed, what everyone thought happened, she has been kidnapped in the confusion of battle. She always acted like she was a boy because women can't succeed Brunn's throne. Regin remembers that in Artesium, the capital of Ganelin's territory, there is a door only the king and his family knows how to open. Since the Prime Minister knows this too, she can prove to him that she is the princess, and Tiger decides to take her there. Meanwhile, Thenardier managed to gather 5 powerful dragons for his army. Ganelin hears about this and realizes Thenardier is now stronger than him, but stays calm. He has also predicted that Tiger will take Regin to Artesium, so he hatches a plan. Meanwhile, Sophia is sent to Brunn as an emissary. She meets Valentina on the way, a black-haired girl and another of the War Maidens. Valentina acts suspiciously, saying she came to the capital of Zhekta to gather information. Later, Tiger and the others find out Ganelon burned Artesium down and disappeared afterward. On their way to Artesium, Tiger and the others face Thenardier's army and a large battle breaks out. Ellen and Ludmila focus on fighting the dragons and manage to kill all but 2 of them. However, the 2 remaining dragons prove to be much powerful than the others, somehow blocking their magic attacks. Before noon, both armies retreat. Regrouping with the others, Ellen concludes that the 2 remaining dragons have chains that cancel magic wrapped around them. 4 hours later, the armies clash again. Tiger's army reorganizes, wanting to appear weak to Thenardier. When Thenardier's army advances, Tiger's army retreats, pulling Thenardier's men with them and leaving Ellen and Ludmila to fight against the dragons again. Strategically fighting without using magic, the 2 War Maidens manage to defeat one of the dragons. However, the other dragon is harder to kill, since he is heavily armored. While Ludmilla distracts him, Ellen launches herself into the air, pierces the dragon's weak spot, and activates a powerful spell, destroying it from the inside. In the meantime, Tiger held his ground against Thenardier's army and forced them to run away. Tiger decides they will continue their journey towards Artesium and try to enter the secret room from the underground. Their goal is entering the Holy Grotto, a cave where the founder of Brune, called Charles, got divine guidance and decided to become king. There are 3 entrances to that place, and they decide to reach it through to the Temple of Masha. The next day, Tiger and the others reach a small temple. With Regin's help, they find a secret stairway and descend down it. Advancing further, they are stopped by Thenardier and a part of his army. Thenardier is bent on killing Regin, but Tiger and the others protect her, fighting his soldiers. Thenardier sends his strongest warrior, a shaggy swordsman called Steed. Ellen fights her way towards Thenardier and faces him head-on, but he is strong. Meanwhile, Tiger and his soldiers defend Regin from Steed, who proves to be formidable as well. Suddenly, the cave starts collapsing and both armies are forced to retreat. Waking up in the collapsed cave, Tiger sees Steed dead, crushed by debris. Nearby, he also sees Bertrand on the brink of death, having been cut by Steed's sword. Bertrand is happy he could sacrifice himself for his lord. He is proud of Tiger and dies, telling him to take care of Titta. Outside, Ellen and the others ride towards Artesium. Suddenly, they see a huge blue column of light, and Ellen recognizes it's Tiger's doing. In Artesium, they find the town demolished and its citizens miserable. In the middle of a giant crater, Ellen finds Tiger alive but realizes Bertrand is dead. That night, Tiger is devastated by Bertrand's death. In the moment he realized Bertrand died, he was able to unleash the full power of the magic weapon and break through the cave to the surface. Ellen visits him, asking him what he wants to do next, but he doesn't know yet. She tells him she will fight with pride whatever they end up deciding to do. In the past, she used to be a wandering mercenary with no home, but she was always proud of herself. Hearing this, Tiger realizes he can't keep grieving forever and stands up. He decides to hold a funeral for Bertrand as soon as he returns to Alsace. Ellen makes him realize he doesn't have to fight to protect Alsace. If he restores the trade routes between Alsace and Leitmeritz, he can make Alsace into a valuable trading town. The next day, Brune's prime minister, Bedouin, visits Tiger and the others. He immediately recognizes Regin as the king's daughter and reports that the king has finally recovered his reason but has been poisoned by Ganelon. Asking Tiger what he wants to do next, Tiger tells him he wants to defeat Thenardier. Bedouin respects his decisions but tells him they need to hurry to Nice and visit the king, who is dying. On their way to Nice, Tiger and his army clashes with Thenardier's forces. Lim realizes Thenardier's troops are more disorganized than usual, thinking it's because their leader, Steed, died in the cave. Somewhere else, Tiger, Ellen, and Ludmilla face Thenardier himself. Thenardier tells Tiger he wanted to conquer Alsace so he could prevent Jected from interfering with him and wanted to burn the territory to the ground. Tiger gets determined to defeat him, while Thenardier wants to avenge his son Zion. Tiger charges up his magic arrow but almost loses control because of his rage. Ellen punches him, getting him back to his senses. His senses restored, Tiger calmly takes a single arrow. The arrow flies but changes direction with the wind, making Thenardier unable to block it. It pierces his forehead, killing him and ending the war. Tiger won the fight entirely with his own skill and determination, without interference from Ellen or her sword. Somewhere else, Ganelon is preparing to secretly leave, joined by Valentina. Sometime later in Nice, everyone is celebrating Tiger's victory and Princess Regin's return. That night, Tiger, Ellen, and the others visit the King of Brune. The king apologizes for not being able to do anything and wants to reward Tiger. Tiger wants the Kingdom of Brune to agree to a 3-year peace pact with the Kingdom of Jected, and the king agrees. Regin signs the contract, establishing her position as the future queen. The king also gives Tiger the special title of Knight of the Moonlight. Several days later, the king dies peacefully. In the end, Alsace came under Tiger and Ellen's joint control. Hey, thank you for staying all the way till the end. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like. It takes only a second, but it means everything to us. Have a great day and see you in the next video. In a certain part of Academy City in the middle of the night, a white-haired boy known as Accelerator is filling his shopping cart with an unusually excessive amount of black coffee cans. After getting outside of the store, he is met by a group of delinquents who tries to attack him, though obviously to no avail. He mentions to himself that since his defeat in the hands of Toma, he is no longer considered the strongest in Academy City, even though his powers still remain and that he is still a level 5. While walking, he passes by a certain apartment complex and is annoyed by the noise created by 2 certain characters. He uses his vector powers to mute out any sound from him as he continues to walk alone. However, unbeknownst to him, he is being followed by someone. After a while, the person comes close enough to him for him to notice and uses his vector powers to unmute sound. With this, Accelerator discovers that it is from a voice of a little girl who calls herself Misaka twice. Annoyed by her, Accelerator continues to walk along, ignoring the girl, though she continues to try and talk to him, telling him that she has been trying to get him to notice her all this time. Suddenly, Accelerator remembers the name Misaka. Accelerator removes the cloth from the girl himself and sees that the girl is completely naked, making her cry. The girl says that she is the 20,001st clone to be produced for the Sisters Project and says that her codename is Last Order. She continues by saying that since the experiment has been nullified, she was apparently released from her tank in the middle of the incubation process, as is the reason why she appears so small in comparison to the other clones. Last Order states that since Accelerator has connections with the researchers, she could use him to contact them for her. Accelerator gives an immediate response to her that he is not interested, which somewhat disappoints Last Order since she has nowhere else to go. Apparently feeling sorry for her, Accelerator lets Last Order follow him to his apartment building. When they get to his room, they discover that Accelerator's room has been trashed. Still uncaring and yet somewhat expecting of this, Accelerator lays down his purchases and proceeds to sleep on a relatively intact couch to rest. Last Order, happy, goes and lies on Accelerator's surprisingly intact bed and warns him not to touch her in the middle of the night, much to Accelerator's annoyance. Morning shines through the curtains of Accelerator's room as he awakens from his slumber. Here he discovers that Last Order is still in his room and is hungry, asking Accelerator to cook some food. Accelerator and Last Order go to a restaurant for their breakfast. While Last Order happily asks herself what meal to get, Accelerator notices a person in a white lab coat outside of the restaurant parking lot. It is Amai, according to Accelerator, who is wondering what he is doing there. Amai notices Accelerator's gaze and quickly gets into his car to try and vacate the premises. While eating, Accelerator reminds Last Order of what he did to the clones. Hearing their conversation turning serious, Last Order stops eating and responds to Accelerator. Last Order states that since she is connected to all the clones, she of course knows. Last Order states that she was taught the value of being a clone, and even if a single clone dies, there's no way the entire Misaka network would disappear. Last Order says that without Accelerator, the experiment would never have been proposed and that souls would have never been injected into the lifeless Misaka clone, and she thanks Accelerator for it. Thinking that Last Order is joking, Accelerator smirks and reminds her that he enjoyed killing the clones. However, Last Order counters by saying that Accelerator is lying and says that Accelerator didn't want to do the experiment in the first place. Accelerator gets mad at her observation and says that the fact that he kept continuing with the experiment means that he thought nothing of the clones' lives. Accelerator stands up to leave. However, after turning his back, he discovers that Last Order has been overcome with something. Last Order states that she is in a condition where her body is incomplete as such her current condition. Accelerator walks in familiar places for a while and arrives at a research institute. In a dimly lit and messy room with several computers running sits a woman. She reminds Accelerator that he didn't need to break down the entrance as his ID card is still valid. Accelerator later asks Yoshikawa Kikyu where the experimental body adjustment manual for the sisters is. Accelerator asks about Last Order. Kikyu explains, saying that the special experimental instance known as the Last Order. She states that Last Order was never made to be a part of the experiment to begin with. The point of the sisters was to be killed by Accelerator, and that it requires having 20,000 battles for the experiment to finish. Kikyu continues and says that Last Order is not part of the experiment, but is the command center of the Misaka network, and is the reason why her development has been held up, and why she took care of her even after the experiments was terminated. Kikyu, however, states that 7 days ago, someone has overwrote her program with malicious code. Because of the effect of the malicious code, Last Order ran away from their laboratory as a response. Kikyu continues by saying that the virus will activate tonight, which would spread and infect through the Misaka network and will make it go out of control, where they'll initiate an indiscriminate attack against all humans. Hearing this, Accelerator only laughs at the interesting situation and asks who the suspect is. Kikyu states that the most likely culprit is Amai, which surprises Accelerator after remembering his strange behavior in the restaurant parking lot. She tells that there are two things he can choose to do now: capture Amai and force him to talk about the virus structure and resolve the incident, or secure Last Order, who bears the virus in her mind, and put her back into the incubation tank. The scene cuts to Accelerator running in the streets of Academy City, grasping in his hands Last Order personality files. Accelerator arrives at the place. Here, he is told that a man in a white coat has taken away Last Order. Accelerator contacts Kikyu and report to her about the situation. Accelerator asks why Amai would take Last Order if the virus activating would occur even without doing anything. Knowing that Amai is still inside the city, Accelerator smirks and states that humans' actions become more simplistic when they lose their comfort zones. With that, Accelerator cuts Kikyu off and proceeds to find out where Amai. Meanwhile, near an abandoned research facility, a mysteriously out-of-place yellow car sits in desolation. Besides him is Last Order, breathing heavily and having electrodes stuck to her with a notebook computer on her lap monitoring her condition. He pleads to Last Order to be alive at least until after the virus gets activated. Suddenly, an omen of doom appears before Amai, slowly coming towards him in black and smiling as the Accelerator. Out of sheer terror, Amai tries to desperately start his car. He floors his car towards the still smiling Accelerator. However, it is all for nothing, as Accelerator's powers easily crumples his car, making sure that Last Order is safe in the process. Smiling still, Accelerator taunts Amai, asking how he should play with him. Amai desperately tries to get out of his car, but is stopped by Accelerator, who tells him to calm down. Amai later faints. Seeing Last Order's current state, Accelerator asks if they can stop the virus using only the equipment Amai has. Kikyu, however, states that is not possible, as to overwrite the virus, they would need a specialized incubation tank and a testament machine. During the conversation, however, Accelerator begins to notice a distinct sound coming from Kikyu's line. Here, Kikyu reveals that she is heading towards where Accelerator is using a car, as it would save more time, and reveals that she has finished 80% of the analysis of the virus code infecting Last Order, and that she'll make it by midnight. Suddenly, a voice can be heard from Last Order and starts to speak in gibberish and moving erratically. Almost instantaneously, several warning signs begin to pop up on the notebook computer screen. Concerned, Accelerator asks Kikyu what's going on. Hearing Last Order's ramble over the line, Kikyu concludes that the virus has begun its preparations to activate and states that the leaked information that the virus will be activating on 12 midnight was probably a red herring. With alarms going off, Kikyu carefully says to Accelerator that he is the only one who is able to save the situation. Kikyu tells him the most obvious and only single thing he could do in this situation: the elimination of Last Order. Suddenly, Accelerator realizes something and contacts Kikyu regarding it. Having Last Order's personality file before the virus infection, Accelerator asks, since he can control brain cells, is there a possibility that he can manipulate Last Order's personality files? Realizing his plans, Kikyu asks Accelerator if he is planning to use him and his powers as a substitute for a testament machine. She tells he can't. Accelerator, however, disagrees with her and states that if he can use Reflect, Redirect, then he can also be able to manipulate and plugs in the USB containing Last Order's data file into the portable digital. Kikyu continues to argue with Accelerator, but he ignores her and throws away his phone. Using the portable digital terminal device, Accelerator completely memorizes Last Order's data file before her infection with the virus, and concludes that he will just simply get rid of all the code in Last Order's brain that doesn't match the previous data file and say that it is a piece of cake. After destroying the portable digital terminal device, Accelerator touches Last Order's forehead. With that, he begins his operation. Accelerator compares the pre-infection date to the data within Last Order's head. However, he realizes that if he gets rid of all the code, then Last Order would be restored to her state the week prior, the week before she met him. He executes the command to destroy the mismatched code using his powers, and slowly the warning messages on the notebook computer disappear one by one. Last Order begins to respond to Accelerator's tampering, as she starts spouting random words and codes and moving erratically as well. While erasing the codes, Accelerator ponders to himself what he is erasing along with the virus and concludes that it is better for her to forget anyway. Suddenly, as if on cue, Amai regains consciousness and points a gun towards Accelerator, telling him not to interfere. Accelerator is gripped with fear for having a gun pointed at him. He has used up all his processing power in order to delete the virus inside of Last Order's mind and doesn't have the computational capacity left for a redirection. Accelerator reflects with himself he could take his hand off Last Order as so he can regain the capacity for a reflection, which would then make him invincible. He doesn't, and is shot by Amai in the middle of his work, lamenting on how he was too naive at the thought that he, a villain, could save someone and start all over again. Having shot the Accelerator, Amai laughs maniacally for having brought down the strongest Esper with a gun and still living. However, his laughing stops as soon as Last Order announces that the code that Amai injected into Last Order has code break error code. Due to the error, Last Order deems that the processing of the command to be sent to the Misaka network, where it would force the sisters to attack humans, has been aborted. Seeing the failure of his operations, Amai points a gun at the unconscious Last Order. Angered that his fears were correct, Amai fires the handgun. Suddenly, a hand emerges and manages to protect Last Order, reflecting the bullet back towards Amai's handgun, destroying it and injuring his hand. Writhing in pain, Amai turns his head and sees his worst fears come to fruition. The accelerator has survived and has managed to compute a reflection right before the bullet reached his brain. Accelerator emerges holding the gaping and bleed hole in his head and gives a sinister smile. However, Accelerator finally succumbs to his wounds and falls to the ground. Seeing Accelerator fall to the ground, Amai reluctantly checks his body and concludes that he has indeed not moving and with his powers not working. With that, Amai takes another gun from his lab coat and points it at Accelerator. He mocks Accelerator, saying that in the end he didn't have the ability to finish off jobs just like heroes and states that they are rotten regardless. Then a small gunshot rang out and Amai began to bleed. Here, a woman named Yoshikawa Kiku holds a small pistol with her. She was the one who shot Amai. Having been shot, Amai falls down once again. Kiku takes the naked and unconscious last order in the back of her car, where an incubation tank awaits her. Amai comes to once again and tries to sit up, however, he sees Kiku loom over him. She aims and pulls back the hammer of her pistol, ready to shoot to kill Amai. Kiku continues on by saying that Amai need not worry about Accelerator, as he knows someone special amongst his acquaintances. A person with frog face, though he is called the Heaven Canceller by people, is someone who would still save Accelerator's life. Kiku then points her gun on Amai's chest, however, at the same time as this, Amai pulls out his gun and points it at Kiku's own chest as well. Kiku regains consciousness and discovers that she is in a hospital of a certain frog-faced doctor, the Heaven Canceller. Here, Kiku is surprised that she has survived, to which the frog-faced doctor rhetorically asks who she thinks performed the surgery. Kiku states that she thought that she was shot in the heart at point-blank range, to which the frog-faced doctor corrects her by saying it was actually a coronary artery extending from the heart. However, he states that she was pretty much dead on the spot, if it not for the efforts of that kid, the Accelerator. The frog-faced doctor continues by saying that Accelerator has sustained damage to his frontal lobe and has had his language and computational ability affected. Hearing this, Kiku tries to ask if it affects Accelerator's ability as well. However, the frog-faced doctor cuts her off, saying that making something work that is not working anymore is his policy. Before leaving, the Heaven Canceller asks what she's going to do now as the higher-ups found out about the incident and has finally closed down the research facility, and the experiment completely terminated. She was fired. Hearing this, Kiku is disheartened that she can't live as a researcher anymore. The winds pass by and moves the curtains of a certain hospital, where a certain white-haired boy wearing a collar is sleeping soundly, while the girl by the name of Last Order is beside his bed sleeping as well. Yashikawa Kiku is there, as well as Yamakawa Aiho, the latter asking the former to confirm if they are the ones that she will be taking care of, to which Kiku says yes. Sometime later, a SWAT team raiding a facility looking for thieves who stole oxygen containers, but they found no one as the thieves managed to escape. Fast forward, the main man is seen standing on a tower and then jumping to land in a hospital in a very sick fashion that made the skirts fly. He walks out as no one's business, but gets stopped by the adorable Misaka. She scolds him for leaving his bed, so he tells her to go away. In response, she ever cutely hugs his leg, and they go to the doctor's office to remove bandages off his head due to being shot in the skull. The SWAT team arrives at the hospital. The policewoman talks to a lady and tells her what happened in the facility and how the thief escaped using a weapon that can cut through almost anything. She also adds the weapon that was stolen. Seems like it's going to be used against Accelerator, and indeed she was right, as a crazy girl arrives at the scene and blows up cars. Then the shorty steps inside the hospital and cuts a man's arm just to send a message that every short girl can be deadly. However, Accelerator looks unfazed as he reads his book while the lady tells him to get out as the girl is looking for him. He says, "No thank you, leave me be." But when little Misaka hears about the news, she runs off to the kitchen worried about her surprise, which in turn makes our boy worry about her safety. Meanwhile, the SWAT team tries to stop her, but their bullets are not effective against her armor, and to make things worse, when the policewomen learn that they are high school kids, she drops her weapon and resorts to good old-fashioned schooling, as she has this ideal to not shoot a minor, even if they are psychopath-wielding weapons that can cut through steel. She sprints and manages to go past the psycho girl, but chokes on her way. They decide to retreat, but when they see the only thing behind them is a room filled with children, they decide to go forward. Suddenly, the guy pushes the redhead away out of the crumbling wall that our boy used as an entrance. The girl shoots her oxygen-cutting gun, but Accelerator deflects them no problem, putting himself on top. But when Misaka appears and runs to him, the roof collapses, so he protects her, opening his head wound in the process. Seeing the bag Misaka is holding has a drop of blood on it, the redhead girl takes it and leaves with the other girl, leaving the lackey behind. Accelerator goes to pursue the girls underground, where he finds them and shows the redhead why he was the alpha in the city for so long. After easily beating them, he returns back to the hospital with the bag, which he learns was a bag of cookies made for him. The next day, we see a group of doctors who are arguably not doctors as they are killing a girl to study her body. Fast forward 3 days later, and a SWAT team is chasing a girl with the power to reanimate the dead. And as you guessed, the chase ends up inside the hospital our edgy boy is resting in. This girl, unlike the previous one, seems level-headed and expert in hand-to-hand combat. She breaks into Kakashi's sunroom and asks him if he knows the girl in the picture she's holding. Before he looks up, the SWAT team enters the room and catches her dropping the pic. Accelerator later notices it's Misaka. While taking the blondie back to headquarters, it was evident that these SWAT guys are not with the good guys. Luckily, Accelerator went down and ended by reflecting his bullet and throwing Truck-kun at the side like a ragdoll. No iskad for this lad today. He laughs, manically asserting dominance on the other maniac who cowers behind his useless mech, which after getting trashed drops a girl from it, sending our boy to flashback land. Soon after, the real SWAT team arrives and we learn that the girl has been dead for 2 days now and that they were able to use her powers after she died. Later on, we see the maniac informing his superiors about his failure, which leads to his disposal. Meanwhile, the girl returns to Accelerator room to ask him for help. He says no and proceeds to act like a villain. But when the girl tells him that DA, the organization from earlier, wants to use Last Order, also known as Misaka, to further their plan, he releases and tells her to lead the way to their hideout, where she was kept as a prisoner. On his motorcycle, the girl and the white-haired boy arrive at the hideout, where they find the corpse of the man completely dissolved. They also find a giant mech is being piloted remotely by a lunatic guy wearing a doctor cape. We learn that he was able to reanimate the dead by learning the techniques from the girl when she was imprisoned. Then he continues to shame her for her abilities until Accelerator gets fed up and allows himself to be recognized, and then the lunatic decides to retreat. However, before he leaves, we learn that Dr. Lunatic has studied Accelerator abilities and has some sort of plan on how to fight them when the time comes, hinting at a tough battle for our boy's future. Back in the hospital, Misaka enters the room with 3 meals in hand. When she sees the girl sitting beside our boy on the bed, she gets jealous and throws a fit before throwing the food, which leads to the trio going out. Now in restaurant, the two girls bond over food while Accelerator makes a phone call to seek info about the DA org. Back inside the hospital, the doctor arrives at Accelerator room to take Misaka to her checkup appointment. The doctor also gives Accelerator a piece of paper he found in the deceased girl's mouth. Blondie identifies it as a lower spell used to reanimate the girl, hence they go to the morgue to bring her back. While doing the ritual, Accelerator touches the girl's brain, allowing him to see all that she went through. The ritual is cut short by 2 fake SWAT men. Unlucky to them, they get their asses handed out by a half-naked dead girl to then get taught a lesson about true villainy on the hand of Accelerator. Sadly, he collapses mid-lesson due to his unhealed wound, so one guy manages to run outside where he gets confronted by Eye Gobble's Misaka. However, her abilities are no match to the guy's weapons. As such, when the blondie along with her trusty dead friend arrive at the scene, a guy takes Big Misaka as a hostage. Meanwhile, on the other end, Accelerator wakes up after the pretty quick surgery to find out that the blondie is not in the room, meaning she's still chasing the guy. He gets approached by another Misaka, who updates him about the situation and tells him that Gobble's Misaka has been abducted by the group. Then he gets a call from his lady friend to give him more info about the org. Later on, we find out through a phone call with the lunatic doctor that a high-ranking official who is in the DA organization is fed up with the organization mistakes and their extreme behavior. So he calls a lady to let the kids go, and they are freed after destroying one of DA's hideout while searching for Misaka's whereabouts. Following that, we see the SWAT bros raiding a factory. They engage in a gun showdown with DA's fake SWAT bros. Meanwhile, we see Blondie is still on the chase while Accelerator is still in bed after the surgery, so we go back to the raid location. The DA dogs are panicking as we see them asking the lunatic doctor about the situation of his big weapon. He informs them that he needs the hostage first. As such, they tell him where Goggles Misaka is heading. He thanks them and ends the call, revealing that he is planning to ditch these losers once he has the girl and the weapon. Outside, the combat is still on as the DA men try to deliver the girl to a set location. We also see the 4 kids discussing their next move. After managing to subvert the SWAT team's attention by using a mech, the fake bros snuggle the girl. But then they get spotted by the alpha lady. She chases the main guy and manages to stop their escape. Then the scene shifts to the 4 menace kids who are getting closer and closer to the action, entering it with a bang, literally and figuratively. They easily dispatch the big red machine, destroying parts of the hideout and sending the still unconscious Misaka flying. Luckily, the blondie arrives and catches her midair, who in turn gets caught by the half-naked dead redhead. Then the 4 kids ask them to hand the girl over. They refuse, leading one of the 4 to transform into a part battle bunny mech. Our boy is seen flying possibly to the location where the bunny girl is sharing her twisted opinions on teachers before being cut by a wild DA lunatic who gets a freezing end to then turn to the alpha lady. Luckily, the dead redhead jumps in rescuing her. That said, the fight seems far from easy for the redhead, as the bunny chick is way overpowered, so the blondie steps in, giving the redhead some upgrades with her spells, managing to gain the upper hand. Then they decide to go for the blondie, forcing the dead girl to protect her, sacrificing her arms in a very bloody fashion that we probably can't show. Luckily, the man arrives, saving the day with a kick-ass entrance that not only impresses the blondie, but also the short-haired chick on the enemy team. She offers him a spot, but as you all know, Accelerator is a lone wolf, so he brings the girl to her feet and throws a 5-ton machine on her. She gets saved by the team. Witnessing his power, the team pulls a very impressive coordinated attack, locking the main man in a burning tomb and finishing him, or so they thought, until they hear a voice coming out of the death trap. Yep, the man stands tall. They didn't even burn his cloth or harm a single hair on him. Something I can't say about their situation, as our boy dismantles them easily one by one, saving the day. After the dust settles, the blondie keeps nagging over and over for Accelerator to become her master, which is kinda cute and wholesome, seeing how high they perceive him. She also does that waifu holding the back of the t-shirt thing. Sadly, the wholesome moments ended when 3 mechs descended from the sky. They are being controlled by a half-naked lady who seems very insensible. She snatches Misaka and flies away, so Accelerator pursued, then reaching a rooftop, where now the lunatic doctor is in control of the machines, and he tells our boy that unlike the other ones, these 3 are level 5, same level like him. That said, our boy is rank 1 level 5, meaning although these machines are overpowered, he is the ultimate badass with his ability to control his surroundings. The lunatic doctor has no option but to flee. We learn that the process of downloading the 10,000 Death Misaka clones experience has already begun. It became clear by using this info they are aiming to create the first level 6, and from a flashback episode, we learn that the half-naked girl always standing behind the doctor is his sister, or used to be, as he wanted to make her level 6 so she can conquer her sickness. They brought Blondie along just in case things went wrong. The girl killed herself since her brother was against using her in his research. Then she was brought back using a spell, but she's not really back. The current girl with the doctor right now is very twisted, and the doctor doesn't know she's using him. Anyways, back to the current time, the chase evolves into an aerial battle that messes with the data downloading. On the ground, the police evacuate citizens from the area near the fight. However, they are too slow, as one of the machines destroys a building over the heads of people to slow our boy. After he saves the people and destroys one of the mechas, he flies away, having managed to locate the hideout of the doctor, and although he manages to save Misaka, the data download is already finished. The doctor, like your typical anime villain, tells our boy his plans on how he is planning to turn his little sister into the first level 6 before leaving him to fight once again the 3 mechs. But this time, they are all juiced up with the data from Misaka clone's death. The machines transport him outside, so the process of making the girl a level 6 can start safely. The fight begins, and it seems the tag teaming of the steroid-up machines is a bit too much to handle. On the other end, the blondie arrives at the scene. She tries to stop the doctor by telling him, "It's not your sister, you silly Becca. It's an evil spell that resides in the spell. It's controlling your sister's body." Yet the man with a sister complex doesn't believe her. Back outside, our boy went Super God Saiyan mode, creating a flaming tornado that destroyed the camera of the transporting mech, stopping their tag teaming. And then he turned to the main one, turning its metallic ass into a shish kebab, to then finally destroy the last one in a sick fashion, which the doctor applauds and compliment, while the blondie tries to sneak and separate the dark spirit from the dead sister's body using a dagger. Unfortunately, she gets cut by the doctor, which resulted in him getting the sharper end of the knife, and in the downloading to be successful. The girl wakes up all fine and dandy, freaking the blondie as she doesn't know who's in control anymore. That said, when the girl notices her brother's guts have turned inside out, she awakens her new powers that come in the shape of a big tentacle monster. She then uses her tentacles to cover herself in order to evolve further. Seeing all this, the blondie for some reason keeps trying to convince a man on the verge of death that this being is not his Oni-chan, as if it matters. And when the girl emerges from the cocoon, the guy's smirk turns upside down when it was revealed the girl is not his sister. The being is also not the dark spirit the blondie originally thought of. Turns out the girl's dead body is actually being controlled by the 4th headmaster of her family, who, before getting killed centuries ago, bonded his spirit/memories to the spell they used to reanimate the dead, giving him control of the robotic dark spirits that lays in the spells. It is also revealed that he is doing all this to achieve the family-long goal of creating the perfect golem that can counter God himself, and using the empowering machines the nerd made combined with the spell's minor boost as well as the memories of 10,000 death from the Misaka clones, he was able to achieve that goal. The girl tries to talk him out of the idea, but for no avail, as she is talking to a guy in a dead girl's body who has a god complex. It's safe to assume that reason is out of the window at this point, especially after he gets back to the cocoon and ascends in the shape of a tree under the disapproving eyes of Accelerator. Suddenly, the world below loses all colors. Only thing that has color is the tree and Accelerator. Yes, he looks pale as always, but the rage in his eyes complements it. He attacks the person multiple times, resulting in gallons of blood to be spilled. However, it is all useless as the attacks have no effect as the being keeps on regenerating. The being leaves Accelerator with the blondie who is having character crisis while it goes and ascends to godhood. Soon after, through words of encouragement, the group heads deeper inside the building where they find that Dr. Bastard still hasn't given up. He leads the way through shortcuts under the creepy gazing eyes of the BH, who seems worried that they will get to her before the final power-up is achieved. So it decides to attack everyone on site, realizing that it speeds the process. Now action rams up inside as it's attacking the group with tentacles and dead soldiers, who easily get defeated, but they are way too many and the power-up process is going way too fast now. Also, to make matters worse, Accelerator's power battery is running way too low. When they reach the top, Accelerator feels an overwhelming power they can't reflect or manipulate. This overwhelming power indicates the fourth head of the family has achieved his goal through eating the troops, which immediately proved to be a big mistake as we see taking on their spirits. He also took some of their memoirs and desires, which in turn resulted in a consciousness battle to take control of the body. That said, when the group gets to it, Blondie attacks and the monster acts like the dead sister, tricking her to drop her attack before it scolds her for being too stupid to run the family. Seeing all this, Accelerator talks sense to Blondie, and she gets back at it alone yet again since Accelerator has run out of power. Misaka, on the other end, using her electric power, stops the machine connected to the being, giving the Blondie an opening to jump with the knife. This time, the girls attack and shove it in his heart. His last words were, "Who are you?" Accelerator
What's up, man? You good?
But the difference is I'm a lot stronger. After the big fight ended, the sister appeared and thanked him before passing along with her brother. Suddenly, the thing they are standing on starts moving. The Misaka clone tells the brood it will explode, erasing everything in sight, and the follow-up shockwave will destroy the city. So our boy dashes muster the last drop of energy his battery has, and the explosion deflecting it to the sky. He seems dead laying on that lap pillow, but then he moves his lips, bringing joy to the fangirls' hearts. Back in the hospital, Accelerator reads a book before sending Misaka to buy him some coffee to stop her nagging. The Alpha Police lady chit-chats with him while the Blondie is hanging in the morgue to release the redhead's dead body, which surprisingly proves to be an emotional goodbye. Ending the series with Accelerator drinking way too much coffee on top of towers before getting back to the usual business.
I'm doing all right.
The end. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe for more amazing recaps.
Nice. You can see trying to finish up this animation.
The anime begins by showing a 37-year-old young man named Mikami Satoru who works as an ordinary contractor at a firm after he graduates from college. But even though Satoru has lived a perfect life with a well-paying job in a big company, he still doesn't have a girlfriend until now. That day, Satoru met his junior named Tamura, who was dating a girl named Sawatari Miho. Tamura invited Satoru to have lunch together while discussing the matter of their office work. But on the way to the restaurant, a robber suddenly appeared from the other side and ran towards them, holding a knife. Seeing that Tamura was about to be killed by the robber, Satoru moved quickly and immediately pushed Tamura's body so he could survive. However, that action actually made Satoru injured badly by a knife stab, and Satoru, who lost a lot of blood, began to lose consciousness. At the last moment, Satoru hears a voice from another world, or Isekai, who magically grants him various powers based on all the last words he spoke. As a result, Satoru has various defensive strengths ranging from heat resistance, stab resistance, physical attack resistance, pain nullification, cold resistance, and attack powers such as predator skills to great sage skills. After Satoru died, he was reincarnated into the world of Isekai, where he transformed into a blind slime trapped in a rock cave. Satoru tries to adapt to his new body and the environment around him until he begins to understand the power he has after the god explains everything to him. In the cave, Satoru tries to survive by looting various plants in that place and turning them into medicine. He also absorbs a magic crystal stone in the cave until he accidentally falls into a lake and gets a new skill in the form of water pressure propulsion. After that, Satoru met a giant dragon named Veldor who could help him to have a vision on the condition that he had to accompany the dragon for a long time. Satoru agreed to the offer and the dragon gave him a magic perception skill that allowed him to see. After realizing the uniqueness and intelligence possessed by Sadaru, Veldora then asked him how he got trapped in the cave. After hearing about the story of Sadaru's reincarnation, Veldora then told about how he got trapped in the stone cave. Veldora had been attacked and defeated by an isekai hero who activated the immortal prison skill locked up in the cave. Hearing that, Sadaru then intends to unite their strength so that they can get out of the cave. After they unite their bodies and powers, they then baptize each other by giving them new names. Veldora named Sadaru Rimuru Tempest, and Sadaru named Veldora Tempest for Veldora. The news of Veldora's disappearance from the rock cave located within the great forest of Jura made the various kingdoms around the forest frightened and wary. One of the kingdoms affected by the news of Veldora's disappearance is the Bluemund Kingdom, which the Bluemund King leads with the guildmaster named Fuse. To overcome this crisis, Fuse then sent several adventurers to investigate the stone cave and find out where Veldora was. On the other hand, Rimuru, who has now received the power of Veldora, began to fight various monsters such as giant black snakes, armasaurs, black spiders to giant bats to get new skills. Shortly after Rimuru found the cave door, the three adventurers sent by Fuse suddenly opened the door and Rimuru took the opportunity to exit the cave. After successfully exiting the rock cave, Rimuru met a group of goblins who were about to attack him because they were frightened by his presence in the forest they inhabited. Rimuru tried to convince them that he wouldn't hurt them and started talking to them. After realizing that Rimuru was not a bad slime, the goblins then asked him to help them attack the direwolves who were destroying their forest. It turned out that the goblins asked Rimuru for help because he had an aura of immense power and believed that Rimuru could help them defeat the direwolves. The goblins also said they were willing to make Rimuru their leader if he succeeded in assisting them in getting rid of the direwolves. Rimuru then planned to help the goblins, starting by encouraging them, healing the goblins injured in the first attack, and devising a strategy for the next attack. That night, Rimuru confronted the direwolves who were about to attack the goblins and tried to approach them by diplomacy so that they could solve this problem without war. However, because the direwolf leader refused the offer, a fight between them was unavoidable and Rimuru started directing the goblins to shoot at the direwolves. As a result of the fight, several direwolves were injured and the direwolf leader was killed by the cutting string trap Rimuru had previously prepared. After that, Rimuru used his mimicry skill to transform into the direwolf leader and make all the remaining direwolves submit to him. Thus, the feud between the goblins and the direwolf was successfully resolved, and Rimuru managed to unite them into one group. The next day, Rimuru asked them their names, and the goblin chiefs replied that they didn't have names because magical creatures like them could communicate using telepathy. Hearing that, Rimuru took the initiative to give them names so he could be closer to them and call them more easily. Rimuru then named the goblin chief with the name Rigger and several other goblins with the names Gobta, Gobji, Gobze, Gonjo, and Haruna. After Rimuru gave the direwolf Alpha the name Ronga, he suddenly fell unconscious because he had used up too much energy. As it turned out, with Rimuru giving names to the goblins and direwolves, he had baptized them and gave them the ability to evolve to become stronger. After Rimuru woke up from his stupor, he announced some important rules for the direwolves and goblins. In that rule, he mentioned that they must not attack humans, they must not demean other races, and they must not kill their fellow group members. After conveying all the rules, Rimuru appointed Rigger to lead the goblin and direwolf group to establish a forest village. But they find it difficult to build buildings and infrastructure because the goblins and direwolves still don't have the ability and knowledge of building construction. Rigger then advised Rimuru to go to the Dwarfgon Kingdom and ask for help from the dwarves who have the expertise to build buildings and forge iron. After hearing Rigger's suggestion, Rimuru decided to go to the Dwarfgon Kingdom with Ronga, Gopta, Rigger, and several other goblin members, while the other goblins and direwolf members
You see, I tell you I was trying, so.
in the middle of the journey, they rested for a while on the bank of the Amelia River to gather their energy. In the evening, Rimuru received information that the kingdom of Dwarfgon was led by a human king named Gopta who had created a liberal system in the kingdom. After arriving at the gates of the Dwarfgon Kingdom, Rimuru ordered Ronga and the others to wait in the forest while he and Gopta would enter the Dwarfgon Kingdom. While at the security check line, Rimuru got into a fight with two men and the fight caused chaos in the place. As a result, Rimuru and Gopta were captured by the Dwarfgon royal security officers and imprisoned in the royal prison. Inside the prison cell, Rimuru heard that an Allosaurus monster was attacking the king's dwarves, so he offered to help by giving some healing potions to treat the injured dwarves. The royal prison guard named Kaido also received the potion.
You streaming tonight?
Rimuru and Gopta because of the help Rimuru had given and saved 3 dwarfs in their
This
kingdom.
design is
As a
looking
thank
good.
you, Kaido introduced Rimuru to a blacksmith named Kaiji
Thanks, man.
who would ask him for help to build the village's infrastructure with the 3 dwarves whom Rimuru had saved. But Kaijin couldn't help Rimuru because he still had some duties from the royal minister named Festa to make sword weapons and collect crystal stones to make weapons.
It ain't done yet.
Rimuru then gave Kaijin a lump of
The
crystal
cleanup
stone
is what taking
from
long
the rock cave
right now.
that Kaijin was. He then helped Kaijin complete a weapon by copying the sword weapon that he had previously made.
Alright,
In
cool.
the evening, Kaijin takes Rimuru to a tavern to drink and have fun while introducing him to a fortune teller girl. The fortune teller girl mentioned that Rimuru would meet a girl from another world in the future, and that girl would be his soulmate. In the middle of the party, Festa's minister suddenly appeared with an arrogant attitude while insulting Kaijin and Rimuru as lowly beings. Hearing Festa's words, Kaijin felt angry and immediately beat him until he was battered. As a result, Rimuru and Kaijin were detained in the royal prison to be tried before King Gazel the next day. While in prison custody, Kaijin and the three dwarves who worked for him decided to help Rimuru and came with him to the big forest village of Jura. On the next day, Rimuru and the others were in court before King Gazel to decide whether they would be punished or not. Festa cheated by bribing Kaijin's defense attorney to corner his position and make Kaijin look guilty in front of King Gazel. Fortunately, King Gazel, who had learned what had happened, decided to free Kaijin and the others. After Kaijin and the others left, King Gazel immediately scolded Minister Festa for slandering Rimuru, the person who had helped the Dwarf-God Kingdom with healing potions. Meanwhile, in the Blue Moon Kingdom, Fuse gets a report from three adventurers who had previously been sent to the Stone Cave, namely Kaval, Aaron, and Guido. After receiving a report from them, Fuse again sent them to investigate the Jura forest because Valdora could be hiding around the forest. When Kaval, Guido, and Aaron are about to leave for the Jura forest, they meet a masked girl named Shizu who wants to join them. On the other hand, Rimuru and the others had returned to their village with the dwarves who had skills as a carpenter and a blacksmith. With their help, the goblins began learning the techniques to construct various infrastructures and buildings in their village. Village development became more effective because the goblins already had the skills, and the village became more widespread. While Rimuru was on patrol with Gopta, Rigger approached him and reported that some humans had infiltrated the Jura forest. It turned out that the people Rigger was referring to were three adventurers from the Blue Moon Kingdom who had previously been sent by Fuse, and a group of giant ant monsters was currently chasing them. After running quite a distance, Shizu suddenly stopped and immediately fought against the giant ant with the power of the fire sword until all the giant ants were killed. But when Shizu was off guard, a giant ant monster that was still alive suddenly attacked her from behind. Fortunately, Rimuru arrived just in time and immediately unleashed his powerful skill to save Shizu. Rimuru then invited Shizu and the three Blue Moon adventurers to rest in their village. While they were having lunch together, Rimuru asked where they had come from and their reasons for coming to the Jura forest. Kaval then explained that they were adventurers from the Blue Moon Kingdom who were sent by the royal advisor to investigate the whereabouts of the dragon Veldora who had disappeared from the eternal prison. In the afternoon, Rimuru had a private conversation with Shizu because he believed that Shizu was the girl who had previously been predicted to be his soulmate. Rimuru explained to Shizu that he was a human who came from another world and reincarnated into slime in that world after he died saving someone. Hearing this, Shizu tells Rimuru that she is also a human from another world who was summoned to the world of Isekai during the night of the fireworks festival in Japan. This then made Rimuru worried because he knew that a human who came to the Isekai world as a result of the summoning ritual would have consequences as a curse from the great power they got. However, since Shizu didn't want to explain what the consequences would be to Rimuru, he also respected Shizu's choice. Seeing the sadness on Shizu's face, Rimuru tried to comfort her by showing some beautiful memories and scenery in Japan with his special powers. Shortly after, Rimuru was asked by Kaijin to return to the village while Shizu was still silent on the hill, remembering the terrifying process of the summoning ritual she had experienced in the past. The scene switches to the past to reveal Shizu's memories of the time the summoning ritual took place. In the human world, Shizu, previously named Shizue Izawa, accidentally meets a demon lord named Leon Cromwell who has a fire spirit named Ifrit. Leon unites the fire spirit with Shizu's soul in a spirit summoning ceremony, and he uses Shizu as his weapon to defeat every enemy he faces. After some time, Shizu finally got a little girl as her new friend in the world of Isekai, but one day, she unknowingly attacked and killed the girl due to the influence of the fire spirit controlled by Leon. After Shizu realized that she had killed her friend, she felt so guilty and traumatized that she had nightmares every night. Back to the present, Shizu is getting more comfortable with Rimuru because she can share her feelings that she has been keeping to herself all this time. Rimuru said that Shizu would stay in the village as long as she wanted, but Shizu refused the offer because she wanted to find Leon's whereabouts, which had trapped her in the world of Isekai. Then when the three Blue Moon adventurers were about to return to the kingdom, They invited Shizu to join them, but she refused, and suddenly, she felt pain. It turned out that the fire spirit had taken over Shizu's consciousness until she turned into a fire spirit figure and instantly destroyed several buildings in the Jura Forest village. Rimuru immediately asked Rigger to evacuate the goblins and Direwolf while he and the 3 Blue-Mund adventurers would try to fight the fire spirit controlling Shizu's body. At first, Rimuru had a hard time defeating the fire spirit, and he was surprised that the water knife attack did not affect the fire spirit. But after learning that Aaron's power can hurt the fire spirit, Rimuru immediately asks Aaron to attack him so that he can copy that power. After Rimuru asked Ranga to take all the Blue-Mund adventurers who had been injured by the fire explosion away from that place, Rimuru tried to attack the fire spirit alone with Iceland's strength. Even though the fire spirit had used the power of shadows and trapped Rimuru in extermination magic, he could still survive because he had an extreme heat resistance power. Then after seeing the fire spirit off guard, Rimuru used the opportunity to bind the fire spirit and devour him with the power of the predator's skill so that he was confined within his body. After the fight, Shizu was saved, and Rimuru took care of her, hoping she would recover. After Shizu came to her senses, she apologized to Rimuru because she had ruined Rimuru and the goblin's residence. Shizu then said that in the past, she had met a masked hero who had helped her to escape Leon's control, and before they parted, the hero gave his mask to her. After the hero disappears, Shizu begins an adventure to fight evil in the world of Isekai before she ends up teaching in the kingdom of Ingratia where summoned children from the human world are housed. Shizu realized that she would soon die because of the curse she got from the spirit summoning ritual, so she asked Rimuru to tell her his real name. Rimuru then told Shizu about his real name. He allowed Shizu to rest in his body and promised that he would find Leon. After Shizu died, Rimuru paid his last respects to her and used his predator's ability to save Shizu's body. On the next day, the Blue-Mund adventurers said goodbye to Rimuru and thanked Shizu. Elsewhere, an orc suddenly fainted from hunger and exhaustion, so a demon named Galmut christened the orc with the name Geld so that the orc transformed into a stronger creature to rule the Jura Forest. Meanwhile, Kaijin and the others started repairing the damaged buildings and continued other unfinished infrastructure development plans. On the other hand, the goblins and dwarves were getting used to Rimuru's human form, and they also started to involve Rimuru in various daily activities. That day, Rimuru ordered Ranga to escort Gopta and the other goblins who were about to hunt in the forest to protect them from the attacks of the beasts. Meanwhile, Rimuru will go into Veldura's cave to practice a new skill in the form of black fire and try to use Shizu's mask that can hide his powerful aura. Shortly after, Rimuru received an emergency signal from Ranga indicating that the goblins were in danger. Rimuru immediately went after them and found the goblins who had been injured from the attacks of the 6 ogres. After healing the injured goblins, Rimuru tried to approach the ogres to negotiate so there would be no pointless battle. But the ogre leaders refused to listen to him because they thought that Rimuru was the one who had sent a group of orcs to destroy their village. This was because Rimuru wore the same mask as the person who sent the orcs. After a very short battle, Rimuru could trounce them and decided to show his strength to the ogres so that they would be willing to consider his negotiation offer. The second battle was prevented after the ogre leader's younger sister persuaded the ogre leader to investigate who had sent the orcs to their village. After that, the ogres apologized to Rimuru and the goblins for having a bad attitude towards them. Before the ogre left, Rimuru invited them to have a drink together in the forest village of Jura while having a chat together. In the conversation, the ogre said that their village had been attacked by powerful orcs and controlled by a demon with enormous power. Hearing that, Rimuru advised the ogres to form an alliance with the goblins and join as his henchmen so that they would have shelter. The next day, after much deliberation, the ogre leader met Rimuru and decided to join his subordinates until they succeeded in taking revenge on the orcs. After hearing their sincerity, Rimuru then baptized the ogres with the names Sio, Hakuro, Sawe, Kurobe, Shuna, and appointed Benimaru as the leader. Meanwhile elsewhere, an army of orcs numbering in the thousands began to flock to the borders of the Lizardman Kingdom in the Lake Sis area. The Lizardmen's royal guards immediately informed the Lizardman King about the arrival of the orc troops heading to their territory. The Lizardman King then ordered his son named Gabiru to investigate what caused the orc army to come to their territory and overcome the orc army's invasion. At the same time, Rimuru received information from Benimaru and Sawa that there was a demon named Galmut who had come to their village to baptize the ogres. But Benimaru chased the demon away, so there is a possibility that the person behind all these incidents is the demon Galmut. Meanwhile, Gabiru, who has arrived in the middle of the Jura Forest with his troops to gather more troops from the goblins, intends to come to the Jura Forest village to conquer the village. But after Gabiru and his troops arrived at the village, they were easily defeated by Gopta, so they fled in fear. Rimuru then sent Sawi to investigate what was happening in the Lizardman Kingdom. From the investigation that Saoi had carried out, Rimuru finally got information that thousands of orc troops were coming to the territory of the Lizardmen Kingdom. That night when Rimuru and the others were having a meeting, Saoi informed that there was a dryad who wanted to meet Rimuru. After the dryad appeared, she introduced herself as trainee and asked Rimuru to help defeat the orc army and the mighty orc lord. That night, Rimuru asked Saoi to meet the Lizardmen King and tell the Lizardmen army not to attack the orc army first, because the orc army could copy the attack abilities of the Lizardmen. On the other hand, Gabiru and his squad meet a demon disguised as a clown. The demon instigated Gabiru to stage a coup against the Lizardmen King or Gabiru's own father. At the same time, Saoi had arrived at the Lizardmen's kingdom and conveyed a message from Rimuru so that the Lizardmen troops would not attack and only use defensive strategies until help from Rimuru arrived. Although the members of the Lizardmen Kingdom initially refused it, after they saw Saoi's abilities, they decided to comply with the request and allied with Rimuru. Unfortunately, after Saoi left the Lizardmen Kingdom, Gabiru came with his troops and immediately staged a coup d'etat on his own father. After successfully carrying out a coup, Gabiru and his troops prepared to attack the orc troops who would soon arrive in their territory. On the other hand, Rimuru and the others were ready to fight against the orcs and were on their way to the Lizardmen Kingdom. On the way, Rimuru met the daughter of the Lizardmen King, who was injured from fighting with the orc army alone. After healing the princess with a potion, Rimuru then asked the princess how the current condition of the Lizardmen was, and the princess replied that currently, Gabiru had staged a coup d'etat on their father. Hearing that, Rimuru was determined to be able to help the Lizardmen King defeat the orc army and get his throne back in the Lizardmen Kingdom. Gabiru and his army began to struggle to defeat the orc army after realizing that the orc army could wrest physical strength from the Lizardmen army. Moreover, Gabiru saw a giant orc general with a frightening aura, which definitely made him feel frightened at the thought of the orc lord's power. It turned out that Benimaru's previous guess was proven right, that the mastermind behind all this incident was the demon Galmud, who was currently watching over the orc troops using a magic crystal ball from the middle of the Jura forest. Shortly after that, Dryad appeared and intended to kill Galmud, but unfortunately, Galmud and his subordinates managed to escape. Rimuru and the others finally arrived at the battlefield, and they immediately rescued Gabiru, who was getting exhausted after fighting against the giant orcs. After Gopta and Ranga save Gabiru, the ogres start fighting with their special abilities. Benimaru attacked with the power of black flames, Hakuro attacked with the power of the sword, and Sion attacked so brutally that they managed to slash the orc army by quite a large number. Ranga began to transform into a Tempest direwolf so that he had the power of a deadly storm that could finish off the orc troops that surrounded the Lizardmen army. At the same time, Saoi had managed to save the Lizardmen King and directly communicated with the demon Galmud to show the defeat of the orc army that had been sent by him. Galmud, who panicked because the defeat of the orc army in this battle could make the demon lord angry and punish him, immediately rushed to the battlefield to face Rimuru. When Galmud arrived at the battlefield, he grumbled in annoyance at Rimuru's troops while summoning the orc lord he had created earlier. Rimuru, without feeling the slightest fear, immediately approached Galmud and showed his power so great that it scared him. The orc lord named Geld then appears after Galmud and summons him to attack Rimuru. But unexpectedly, instead of attacking Rimuru, Geld killed Galmud and preyed on him out of hunger. After preying on the demon Galmud, Geld transformed from an orc lord into a very powerful orc disaster. The attacks from Rimuru's troops did not impact Geld because he could regenerate very quickly. Seeing it, Rimuru tried to attack Geld with a combination attack from several skills he had, but it still couldn't hurt him. Rimuru finally used his predator skill to prey on Geld's body and strength, so Geld slowly began to lose power and was defeated. When Rimuru preyed on Geld, Rimuru had a vision of his past memory which showed a food crisis and famine so terrible in the orc village that Rimuru promised Geld that he would take care of the orc race and save them from starvation. After the battle, Rimuru held a meeting with his troops with the orc group and the lizardmen group. He explained that the orc army did all that because of the famine that hit their village, so the lizardmen would also forgive the orcs. After that, Rimuru proposed the idea of allying with the goblins, ogres, lizardmen, and orcs into one group in an association called the Jura Great Forest Alliance. Then, the Dryad or Forest Elf overseeing the Great Forest of Jura then appointed Rimuru as the alliance's leader. After that, Rimuru baptized the loyal subordinate of Geld under the name Gerudo and appointed him as the new leader of the Orc Nation. Rimuru has also succeeded in helping the Lizardman King reclaim his throne in the Lizardman Kingdom after Rimuru baptized the king with the name Abiru. After Abiru became king of the Lizardmen, Abiru expelled Gabiru and his troops as punishment for all the mistakes and coups committed by him before. Over time, Rimuru helped the orcs rebuild and develop their village to be safer and more prosperous. A A few days later, the army of the Dwarfgon Kingdom and the King of Gazal came to Rimuru village after he received
Drink
information
some
about
water,
Rimuru
drink
who had
some
defeated Orc
water.
Disaster and built the Jura Great Forest Alliance. After having a short conversation, Gazal, who was initially worried about Rimuru's whereabouts, finally realized that Rimuru was not a bad person. In the evening, King Gazal invites Rimuru to cooperate between Rimuru's village and the Dwarfgon Kingdom. After considering a few things, Rimuru agreed to the offer and called their territory the Jura Tempest Federation, with Rimuru's village as the kingdom's capital. As a thank you, King Gazal handed Festa to Rimuru so that he could hire him as his subordinate, because Festa had quite advanced scientific abilities. At the same time, Gabiru and his troops came to meet Rimuru and intend to join his men. Rimuru accepts them and orders them as Sawe's men after he baptizes them into the Dragonite army. Rimuru gave a special task to Gabiru and Festa to grow medicinal plants in Veldora's rock cave and conduct research in the laboratory located in the rock cave. On the other hand, the 4 demon lords gathered in the palace after they witnessed Rimuru's fight with Orc Disaster on the battlefield earlier. The 4 demon lords named Milan, Clayman, Frey, and Carrion are 4 of the 10 demon lords in the Isekai world. Milan, who was curious about Rimuru's power, came to the Jura Tempest Federation to meet him. After Rimuru saw Milan's behavior, which was very childish and could be easily distracted, he didn't feel anxious about her presence and started spending time with her. After the village leaders of the Jura Tempest Federation learned that Milan was one of the demon lords, they concluded that it was likely that another demon lord would come to their village. Meanwhile, in the Blue Moon Kingdom, Fuse and the Blue Moon King also received news about Rimuru's victory in the battle against Orc Disaster, so Fuse and his troops intend to visit Rimuru's village. Returning to the Jura village of Tempest, Rimuru began to dig up information about the other demon lords to Milan after the envoy of the demon king Carrion named Pobio came to their village. In addition to the Blue Moon Kingdom, another kingdom named Falmus also heard the news about Rimuru's victory and the Jura Kingdom alliance that Rimuru had formed. The Falmus royal envoy, led by a young man named Youm, also came to Rimuru's village at the same time as the Blue Moon royal envoy led by Fuse. After arriving at the village of Jura Tempest, Youm and Fuse then met Rimuru and the other village leaders of Jura Tempest to hold a meeting. In the meeting, Rimuru asked Youm to join the Jura Tempest alliance and asked him to spread information about Rimuru's good intentions so that other kingdoms would not consider him a world threat. Youm, who had understood Rimuru's intentions, agreed to the request and decided to learn to fight with Rimuru's troops. On the other hand, the demon lord Clayman received news that the strongest monster named Charybdis would soon rise, and Clayman ordered his subordinate named Tyr to find a way to control Charybdis. After he learns that the envoy of the demon king Carrion named Pobio is planning to take revenge on Rimuru, he instigates Pobio to control Charybdis and use the monster's power to defeat Rimuru. After Tyr and Pobio arrived at the cave where Charybdis was, Tyr ordered Pobio to unite his soul with Charybdis' soul so that Charybdis could be resurrected. The next day, Dryad's younger sister, Toria, suddenly appeared before Rimuru. She gave news that the monster of calamity named Charybdis had risen and the monster intended to attack the Jura forest. Hearing the precarious situation, Rimuru then held a meeting with the leaders of the Jura Forest Federation to devise a strategy in the fight against the monster Charybdis and the demon lords who controlled Charybdis. The battle between Rimuru's army and the evil demon king's army that controlled Charybdis was fierce the following day. Rimuru's army had difficulty defeating the evil demon lord's army and Charybdis because the enemy's strength was so great. Charybdis, who had the form of a megalodon, then issued a sharp-scale attack on Rimuru's troops. Fortunately, Rimuru could withstand the attack with his new skill called Gluttony. After Rimuru realized that Charybdis had the power of regeneration, he asked the army of Dwarfgon Nation to carry out continuous attacks to hinder Charybdis' regeneration while he analyzed it. After learning that Pobio is inside Charybdis' body and controlling Charybdis' body, Rimuru asks Milan to destroy Charybdis and save Pobio. After Milan managed to destroy Charybdis, Pobio came to his senses and apologized to Rimuru for this incident. He then informs that a demon lord has instigated him to resurrect Charybdis. After that, the demon lord Carrion suddenly appeared and thanked Rimuru for caring for his subordinate Pobio, who had lost control. The next day, Rimuru decided to go to the Ingratia Kingdom with Ronga to find Shizu's disciples because he remembered the promise he had previously made to Shizu. After arriving in the Ingratia Kingdom, Rimuru came to the Freedom Guild headquarters to meet one of Shizu's students who had become Grandmaster named Yuki Kagura. After meeting with Yuki, Rimuru informs Yuki of his intentions that he wants to save Shizu's students from the Freedom Academy. With Yuki's help, Rimuru disguises himself as a teacher at the academy so he can approach Shizu's students. The next day, when Rimuru was about to teach, Yuki told Rimuru about one of Shizu's students named Hinata Seikiguchi, who had left the academy several years ago. In the classroom, Rimuru meets 5 Shizu students named Kenya Misaki, Ryota Sekiguchi, Gail Gibson, Alice Rondo, and Chloe Aubert. Because the students still underestimated and ignored him, Rimuru decided to take them one by one against him in turn. In all those battles, Rimuru won and asked them to listen to him because he was Shizu's best friend, who she sees saving. Rimuru also intends to help them by connecting their souls with spirits, just as Shizu is connected to Ifrit's fire spirit. Thus he can free their souls as he freed Shizu from the Ifrit spirit earlier so that the children would not suffer the consequences of the deadly curse. After gathering information, Rimuru finally found a place inhabited by powerful spirits in the gems of the Ingratian Kingdom. Rimuru went there with Ranga and 5 of Shizu's disciples to find the spirit they were looking for. After entering the building, Rimuru used his mental map to pass through various extremely complicated rooms like a maze without getting lost. After a while, a mysterious voice was suddenly heard trying to communicate with them, and Rimuru said that they only wanted to get blessings from high-level spirits. Not long after, Rimuru and the others were brought to a room inhabited by a large robotic golem. Fortunately, Rimuru could easily defeat the robot golem and destroy the golem with the power of the black flames. After he threatened the spirit controlling the golem that he would unleash another black flame attack, the spirit suddenly appeared and introduced herself as one of the demon lords in Isekai named Ramirez. While the children are resting in Ranga's body, Rimuru has a short chat with Ramirez and she tells him that the demon lords in Isekai are actually great spirits, but they turn into demon lords after a transgression or mistake. After that, Ramirez invited Rimuru and the others to go to a room where they could make a wish to a spirit. Through the request, all disciples get a relationship with different spirits based on their power. Gail gets the earth element spirit, Alice gets the space element spirit, Kenya gets the light spirit, Ryota gets the water and wind elemental spirit, and finally, Chloe gets a very rare and powerful fairy spirit in the form of a woman who somehow has a relationship with Feldora. Realizing that it was a very powerful spirit and difficult to control, Ramirez tried to prevent the woman's spirit from entering Chloe's body, but she was too late. Ramirez explained to Rimuru that the spirit was a spirit that came from the future and had received protection from the spirit of the time. Still, Rimuru responded casually as long as the spirit did not harm Chloe. After gaining a spirit connection, Rimuru's protégés begin to live normal lives like him. Rimuru was relieved and happy that he had managed to keep his promise to Shizu to protect the students at the Freedom Academy. Before Rimuru returned to Jura Tempest, he gave Shizu's mask to Chloe and asked Yuki to look after the children while he went on an adventure. When Rimuru returned, the Jura Tempest village grew rapidly and evolved into a more modern city. On the other hand, the strongest demon lord known as Moir secretly keeps an eye on Rimuru because he is interested in becoming his servant. Moir feels sure that Rimuru will summon his spirit in the future because their destiny has been tied to each other. The anime continues with the story of Rimuru, who previously managed to save students from Shizu and help them discover the power of the elements. That day, Rimuru said goodbye to the students he loved because he had to return to the land of Jura Tempest and lead the government in that land. After teleporting to the land of Jura Tempest with Ranga, Rimuru's wolf, which is very loyal, he looks proud because the land of Jura Tempest has developed into a more prosperous city. After that, Rimuru sent Rigger and Benimaru as representatives to do diplomacy with the kingdom of Eurozania led by a demon lord named Carrion. Before the delegates left for Eurozania, he advised Benimaru to avoid conflict and approach it well. After that, Rimuru and the others prepared to welcome the delegation's arrival from the kingdom of Eurozania by preparing a luxurious assembly hall and various delicious dishes made according to the recipe of Shuda, a female ogre who was good at cooking. A few days later, a delegation from Eurozania arrived and began to introduce themselves. The first delegate was a golden serpent woman named Albus, who was one of the high knights of the king of Carrion. The second delegate was the white tiger woman named Subia, who looked arrogant and insulted Rimuru as soon as she got off the carriage. This angered Sion, a female ogre who had always accompanied Rimuru and immediately fought against them. However, as the battle grew fiercer, Albus immediately stopped the fight and said that Subia's provocation was only to test Rimuru's troops' abilities. She felt admired and admitted that she respected Rimuru for forming such a strong army and building a land as big as Jura Tempest. In the evening, the meeting between the delegation and Rimuru was lively with various delicious dishes and quality sake belonging to Jura Tempest. Albus then suggested that they work together so that agriculturally rich Eurozania would be allowed to send their grapes as raw material for the sake, and in exchange for them to receive an exclusive import contract for the sake commodity. A few days after holding several meetings, the delegation of Eurozania returned to their kingdom. As a result of this collaboration, the citizens of Eurozania were allowed to learn the techniques of blacksmithing and weaving clothes. The next day, Benimaru and Rigger returned to Jura Tempest after a diplomatic visit to the kingdom of Eurozania. In a meeting with Rimuru, Benimaru reported that the Kingdom of Eurozania still didn't have any architectural construction techniques but had abundant agricultural resources of excellent quality. After the meeting, Benimaru asked Rimuru for permission to leave all diplomatic matters to Rigor so he could focus more on taking care of the military in Jura Tempest. Hearing his consideration, Rimuru immediately agreed to his suggestion and left the diplomatic affairs entirely to Rigor. The next day, Rimuru went to the Dwarfgon Kingdom to pay a visit after they had not met King Gozel, who ruled the kingdom. He departed with Sion and Shuna and the 2 male goblins who always escorted him, namely Gobta and Gobza. After arriving at the Dwarfgon Kingdom, Rimuru was greeted by King Gozel's sister named Orf, and immediately escorted to the balcony to meet King Gozel. At the meeting, he praised Rimuru and the land of Jura Tempest for defeating the Charybdis monster.
All that concentration. Hold on. We play some game. So, all that concentration and the lines and highlights and stuff. Yeah, I'll give you a break. I'll give this a break. Anyway, you burn me out. You burn me out. I'm feeling burn out, bro. I've been doing this whole evening, this whole morning, bro. I feel the burnout coming on.
What's good, everybody?
That's not happening. So let's play a game. Let's go on to play a game. What game shall I play? Warframe. Ooh. Macarena. I could play Macarena. Or I could play Paladins. Should I play Paladins? Should I play? Let's go back and play Call of Duty. I ain't played Macarena in a bit, so should try it out. Macarena. I log in a bit, so okay, in about 2. Or I could play I could oh I know I could play what game I think I know game I should stream. Change the stream, end the stream and start the stream over again. Actually, I think I need to do that. Okay, let's switch it then. That will come to the other stream, which ain't gonna make any sense. To be separated from that, from this. It could be connected with this. So, end the stream and start a new stream. That's what I'm going to do. After done setting up everything, then I'll start the stream again. That's what I'm going to do.